Chapter 261. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian reacted as well. Perhaps, there was competition between the various peaks of the Seven-Star Sword sect. The facts proved that Duan Lingtian's guess was correct. Lu Qiu slowly said, within the Seven-Star Sword sect, besides the main peak, W Peak, some of the outer court disciples on the other 6 sword peaks will hold an outer court martial competition every other year. The outer court martial competition is divided into 2 stages. The first stage is to decide on the strongest 10 people from the various peaks. These 10 people will participate in the second stage of the outer court martial competition. The second stage of the outer court martial competition will be a competition between the 6 peaks, a competition between the 60 most outstanding outer court disciples. As he finished speaking, a wisp of bitterness appeared on the corners of Lu Qiu's mouth. It had already been a long time since the Migres Peak outer court disciples obtained first place. Outer court martial competition? The gazes of many people lit up, but there were also some people that shook their heads. We've just entered the Seven-Star Sword sect. Once we participate in this outer court martial competition, we can only look for abuse. Perhaps we'll be able to show off in the outer court martial competition in a few years. The people that shook their heads whispered in discussion. Lu Qiu snorted coldly when he heard these people. All of you listen carefully, not every outer court disciple has the qualifications to participate in the Seven-Star Sword sect's outer court martial competition. Only outer court disciples that have entered the sect for less than 3 years have the qualifications to register and participate. Entered the sect for less than 3 years? Some of the outer court disciples that had just entered the Seven-Star Sword sect declined to comment when they heard Lu Qiu. Even then, there's no lack of existences at the 5th or 6th level of the origin core stage or above amongst those outer court disciples. Exactly, to us, encountering a 5th or 6th level origin core stage existence is no different than encountering a 7th level origin core stage existence. However, in this way we ought to be able to show off our ability in another 2 years. You're right. Of course, there were also some outer court disciples that looked forward to the future, and thought of the scene of them being in high spirits in the outer court martial competition. Elder Lu, when is the next outer court martial competition? Duan Lingtian looked at Lu Qiu and asked curiously. He was rather interested in this outer court martial competition. As a top sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, the Seven-Star Sword sect would presumably not be stingy in terms of rewards. Lu Qiu's originally gloomy expression eased up slightly when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. He turned around and looked at Duan Lingtian. The next outer court martial competition will be held in half a year. Duan Lingtian nodded. Lu Qiu withdrew his gaze and shook his head. He originally thought that the person who asked him this question was someone who had the confidence to participate in the outer court martial competition half a year later. Now that he saw Duan Lingtian's age, he dismissed the idea. As far as he was concerned, no matter how high a young man's natural talent was, a young man that wasn't even 20 years old ought to only be a first-level origin core stage martial artist. And he didn't know if the young man would be able to break through to the second level of the origin core stage half a year later. It was impossible for such a person to achieve any results in the outer sect martial competition. Even to the extent that it was impossible for him to obtain the top 10 positions of Migres Peak. Having confidence is a good thing, but if you're overconfident, then you're arrogant. Huarexan was stunned when he heard Duan Lingtian ask Lu Qiu this question earlier, and now that he reacted to it, he couldn't help but ridicule. Duan Lingtian had a carefree expression, as if he utterly didn't hear what Huarexan said. Half a year later? At that time he ought to be able to break through to the 5th level of the origin core stage. Finally, Duan Lingtian followed behind Lu Qiu and once again arrived at a stone platform halfway up W Peak. This stone platform was comparatively narrow, and when 20+ people stood together, it seemed to be slightly crowded. Behind the stone platform was a chain bridge that was completely formed from chains linked together, and it led to a sword peak in the south. That's Migres Peak? Duan Lingtian gazed at a precipitous mountain peak that was coiled by clouds and mist in the distance, and his gaze abruptly shone. This mountain peak stood there for a long time, as if transforming into a sharp sword that pierced through the sky, and it gave one a peerlessly fierce feeling that shook the heart. Let's go. Lu Qiu took the lead and brought along the group of outer court disciples to walk onto the chain bridge. When the group of people stood on it, the chain bridge started to sway. So high. Oh my God. If we were to fall down from here, not even a corpse would remain. Nonsense. That's for sure. Instantly, besides Duan Lingtian, the remaining group of outer court disciples that had just entered the Seven-Star Sword sect all exclaimed in surprise. A small number of people had ghastly pale expressions. There are people in this world that have acrophobia as well? Duan Lingtian shook his head, and his gaze descended onto the other end of the chain bridge. This chain bridge was at least 300 or 400 meters long, and connecting Dubhe Peak to Migres Peak was undoubtedly an extremely large project. This chain bridge ought to be connected by an expert at the void prying stage or above. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart, and the scene before his eyes flashed, as if he saw the numerous figures that carried iron chains as they flew past in the sky when the Seven-Star Sword sect was established. As expected, the descendants enjoy the shade of the trees planted by the predecessors. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Wuxia stood at the side, and his gaze quickly descended onto the violet-clothed young man and completely froze. Amongst the 20 outer court disciples that he'd brought along that had just entered the Seven-Star Sword sect, this violet-clothed young man was the youngest, but now that he was on the chain bridge, the person that was the most composed was undoubtedly him. If the violet-clothed young man was a Seven-Star Sword sect disciple, then he wouldn't find it strange that the violet-clothed young man had such a composed expression as he walked on the chain bridge. But this violet-clothed young man was instead here for the first time, and when he stepped onto the chain bridge, it was as if he was walking on level ground. After all, beneath the chain bridge was a bottomless abyss. Even when he'd just entered the Seven-Star Sword sect all those years ago and became an outer court disciple of the Seven-Star Sword sect, his heart couldn't help but tremble when he walked on the chain bridge. "What's your name?" Finally, Wuxia couldn't help but look at Duan Lingtian and ask. This young man caused him to feel that he was slightly unable to see through him. He'd been in the Seven-Star Sword sect for so many years, but it was the first time he had such a feeling towards someone that had just entered the sect. "Elder Lu, you're asking me?" Duan Lingtian was stunned, and when he saw Wuxia nodding to him, he lightly smiled. "I'm Duan Lingtian." "Duan Lingtian? Lingtian? Your name is rather domineering." A trace of a rare smile appeared on Wuxia's face. "Elder Lu, you're too kind." Duan Lingtian lightly smiled and was neither humble nor overbearing. A trace of jealousy and hatred flashed within Huaxian's eyes when he saw Wuxia taking the initiative to speak to Duan Lingtian. Even if it was him, an outer court disciple that had already entered the Seven-Star Sword sect for 2 years, Wuxia had never spoken to him so kindly. "I noticed that you seemed to be staring blankly at the chain bridge earlier. What are you thinking about?" Wuxia looked at Duan Lingtian, and he rubbed the goatee on his chin as he asked curiously. Duan Lingtian's gaze once again descended onto the chain bridge when he heard this, and he lightly smiled. "Actually, I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just thinking that this chain bridge is at least 300 to 400 meters long, and it ought to have been personally done by a group of void prying stage experts or above. Otherwise, it would be utterly impossible to complete such a project." Pfft. Wuxia hadn't spoken when Huaxian couldn't refrain from sneering. "Our Seven-Star Sword sect's 6 chain bridges are famous in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Who doesn't know that our Seven-Star Sword sect's 6 chain bridges were completed by a void prying stage expert?" The others looked at Duan Lingtian as well, and their gazes were more or less slightly strange. Duan Lingtian didn't mind, and he only shook his head and smiled. Only Wuxia glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian and asked, "You didn't know of our Seven-Star Sword sect's chain bridges in the past?" Duan Lingtian shook his head. "Elder Lu, I'm not a member of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. I'm only a person from a kingdom under the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Before today, I've never heard of the Seven-Star Sword sect's 6 ingenious chain bridges. If it's really like this, then your observation ability is rather strong." Wuxia nodded, yet tempestuous waves arose within his heart. This violet-clothed young man that wasn't even 20 years old was actually a person from a kingdom under the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom? Since when was such a genius martial artist able to appear in a mere tiny kingdom? So it turns out to be a country bumpkin from a tiny place. The corners of Huaxian's mouth curled into a trace of a cold smile, and he felt even more disdain in his heart. As far as he was concerned, what ability could a person from a tiny kingdom have? Duan Lingtian naturally noticed Huaxian's disdainful gaze, but he still maintained a carefree expression, as if he utterly didn't notice it. Huaxian was even more unbridled when he saw this. He only thought that Duan Lingtian was like this because he was afraid of him. Meanwhile, the group of people had walked past the chain bridge and arrived at Migres Peak. After walking out of the chain bridge, what entered their eyes was a spacious stone platform, and on the stone platform stood a building. After hearing Wuxia's explanation, Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding. So it turned out that this was the place where the Migres Peak disciples usually purchased and exchanged medicinal pills and spirit weapons. Here one could spend money to purchase medicinal pills and spirit weapons, and one could also use materials to exchange for medicinal pills and spirit weapons. In the northern area of the Seven-Star Sword sect, there was a vast and boundless primeval forest, and there were numerous mineral reserves and medicinal materials within it that were inexhaustible. If the Seven-Star Sword sect disciples weren't people of great wealth, they would enter the primeval forest to search for materials to exchange for medicinal pills to cultivate and spirit weapons to increase their strength. Of course, there were extremely ferocious fierce beasts within this primeval forest. Supposedly, there were even many demon beasts in the depths of the primeval forest. So, this primeval forest had become the place where many Seven-Star Sword sect disciples usually went to temper themselves. All of you can use the Migres Peak Disciple token in your possession to receive your Outer Court Disciple attire. After you've received your attire, all of you can find a place to stay on Migres Peak as your place of cultivation. All of you can seize the place of cultivation that others occupy, but you're not allowed to kill. As he finished speaking, Lucio's gaze became fierce. We can even seize the place of cultivation of others? Many Outer Court disciples that had just entered the Seven-Star Sword sect were stunned. Looks like the Seven-Star Sword sect has tacitly approved of the competition between sect disciples. Chapter 262. After warning the group of Outer Court disciples that had just entered the Seven-Star Sword sect, Lucio turned around and left. Duan Lingtian followed the group of Outer Court disciples to collect a few sets of Outer Court disciple attire. After collecting his attire, Duan Lingtian glanced at the surroundings and was slightly surprised. Huaxin has left? He originally thought that now that Elder Lucio had left, with Huaxin's hostility towards him all along the way, Huaxin ought to have made a move against him, but now Huaxin's whereabouts were unknown. Could it be that he noticed something? Duan Lingtian was slightly curious in his heart, and his first thought was that Huaxin had noticed that he wasn't simple. But would Huaxin have such discerning ability? Duan Lingtian was extremely doubtful in his heart. Perhaps he suddenly encountered some urgent matter. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. However, since Huaxin wasn't here, Duan Lingtian didn't think any further and prepared to look for his future residence and place of cultivation on Migres Peak. He could imagine that some of the good places on Migres Peak had surely already been occupied by others. So, if he wanted to find a place with a good environment, then he must use force to seize it from the hands of others. This was something that Duan Lingtian didn't feel disgusted by. Cloud Continent was a world where the strong were respected, and it was a world of natural selection. The pressing matter at hand is to first find a good place. Duan Lingtian knew clearly in his heart that no matter how much he thought about it now, it was useless. He must first find a good target before taking action. Hiss hiss, right at this moment, a wave of sound sounded out from within Duan Lingtian's sleeve. It was the two little pythons that had awoken from their dreams. After walking into a remote place on Migres Peak, Duan Lingtian let the two little fellows out. In the next moment, his pupils couldn't help but constrict when he glanced at the two little fellows. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons shook their heads and wagged their tails at Duan Lingtian, and their gold and silver eyes flickered with a sheen of complacency. You two brats actually made a breakthrough? Duan Lingtian was slightly speechless. He remembered very clearly that when they left Black Bamboo City early this morning, these two little fellows were only at the 6th level of the nascent soul stage. But just now, his sharp spiritual power realized that the two little pythons had broken through. He had broken through to the 7th level of the nascent soul stage. Seeing Duan Lingtian's surprise, a trace of pride flashed through the eyes of the two little pythons. They wagged their tails and opened their mouths, revealing sharp teeth that flickered with a cold luster as if they were communicating with Duan Lingtian. You want to settle the score with little gold? Duan Lingtian vaguely guessed the meaning of the two little guys and asked with uncertainty. The two little guys nodded like humans. Their movements were identical, as if they had rehearsed it. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but laugh, as he never imagined that he would really understand the meaning expressed by the two little fellows. Little black, little white. You two might be unable to settle the score with little gold for now. The two little fellows became restless when they heard this, and they transformed into two bolts of lightning that flashed out, as if they were searching for something in the surroundings. In the end, they returned to Duan Lingtian's hand in disappointment, and their eyes stared at Duan Lingtian, seeming to be asking something. Little gold is with Kerr now, and Kerr isn't by my side. Duan Lingtian shrugged and shook his head, then consoled with a light voice. Alright, I'll bring you two to look for her when I'm free." As he spoke, Duan Lingtian withdrew the two little fellows that had unwilling expressions into his sleeve. He was slightly helpless towards the two little fellows holding a grudge, and at the same time, he silently mourned for the little gold mouse in his heart. Unless the little gold mouse broke through as well, otherwise, it was impossible for her to be a match for the joint forces of Little Black and Little White. "Migres Peak is so large, I wonder where the best place to cultivate is." Duan Lingtian walked up for a while, and all along the way he saw many sunken canyons on the mountainside, but he wasn't too interested in these canyons. There was practically no light within these canyons, and it could be said that it was completely dark within. Unknowingly, Duan Lingtian noticed that he'd arrived at the peak of Migres Peak. There weren't any handrails on the peak, and the slightest carelessness might cause one to fall into the bottomless abyss, falling to the point that not even one's bones remained. As he stood at the peak, what entered his eyes was a boundless expanse, and his line of sight was completely obstructed. Looks like finding a suitable place to cultivate isn't an easy matter. So cold. Duan Lingtian was able to feel the cold wind that assaulted his face, causing his body to be slightly cold, and he couldn't help but tighten his clothes. "Let's go down and take a look. The place that chain bridge leads to is already close to the peak of this peak. There are surely even more choices down there." Duan Lingtian walked up all along the way and he only saw those few canyons. Although people could live in them, there was no one within them. Obviously, those few canyons were places that everyone disliked. Right when Duan Lingtian was about to head down, swish, swish, his sleeve swelled up and two bolts of lightning, one black and one white, flashed out. "Little Black, Little White, what are you two doing?" Duan Lingtian noticed that the two little pythons were actually standing at the side of the peak, and so long as he wasn't careful, it was very likely that he would directly fall down. For a moment, Duan Lingtian's face completely went pale. Hiss hiss, unexpectedly the two little pythons seemed to be completely unaware of their current dangerous situation, and instead turned around and flicked their tongues at Duan Lingtian. Two mischievous little fellows. Duan Lingtian was somewhat helpless. He walked over and with a slap he caught the two little pythons in his hands. "Little Black, Little White, stop fooling around, let's hurry down. Aren't you too afraid of being smashed to pieces by the fall?" After saying this, Duan Lingtian glared at the two little fellows. Hiss hiss, unexpectedly the two little fellows became restless again, and directly broke free from Duan Lingtian's hands, and returned to the side of the cliff. They nodded at Duan Lingtian, and their tails slapped the side of the cliff twice, as if to express something to Duan Lingtian. "What are you trying to tell me?" Duan Lingtian frowned, looked at the little pythons and then slightly poked his head out to look at the cliff, but in the end he didn't discover anything. The side of the cliff was incomparably steep, and one could imagine that if one fell from here, one would definitely be smashed to pieces, and even if a deity descended to the mortal world, it would be powerless to save one. Hiss hiss, in next to no time, a scene that Duan Lingtian never expected appeared. The two little pythons actually slid down along the cliff, and vanished before his eyes. "Little Black, Little White." Duan Lingtian's face went pale, and he held onto the side of the cliff as he poked half of his body out. What entered his eyes was a vast expanse of clouds and mist, and where were the traces of the two little pythons? "Little Black, Little White." Duan Lingtian's expression was extremely unsightly. During these past few years, he'd long since taken the two little pythons to be his family, and utterly didn't take them to be purely ferocious beasts. Now they fell off the cliff just like that? A trace of sorrow appeared within Duan Lingtian's eyes. Boundless regret arose within his heart. He shouldn't have come to the peak of Migres Peak. Now the two little fellows are gone just like that. Hiss hiss, hiss hiss, suddenly Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted. He vaguely felt as if he'd heard some sound, and it seemed to be the sound of the little pythons flicking their tongues. But when he lowered his head to look, he instead noticed that what entered his eyes was still an expanse of clouds and mist, and there was utterly no trace of the little pythons. Could it be that I'm hallucinating? A trace of suspicion arose within Duan Lingtian's heart, and the more he thought, the more he was sure. Hiss hiss, but isn't this hallucination too strange? Is it not done yet? Whoosh, whoosh. Right at this moment, Duan Lingtian saw the clouds and mist that entered his eyes disperse, and the figures of the two little pythons appeared before his eyes. It was precisely Little Black that swung its tail twice, and dispersed the clouds and mist. Only now did Duan Lingtian notice that at the side of the precipitous cliff, there was actually a crooked tree that grew out horizontally from the cliff. It was strange that this crooked tree, which grew on the side of the cliff in the middle of nowhere, was lush and full of vitality. Its thick branches were inserted into the side of the cliff, and it was as stable as Mount Tai. Soon the clouds and mist drifted over again, and once again blocked Duan Lingtian's line of sight. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. This time the two little pythons went berserk together, swinging their tails and completely dispersing the clouds and mist that blocked Duan Lingtian's line of sight. The crooked tree once again appeared in front of Duan Lingtian's eyes. Not only that, Duan Lingtian also noticed that the two little pythons were motioning for him to go down as well. "You two little guys. I'll trust you this time, but don't kill me." Taking a deep breath, Duan Lingtian stared at the crooked tree, exerted force on his feet and flew down, standing firmly on the branch of the crooked tree. It had to be said that this crooked tree was very sturdy. Duan Lingtian was 1.8 meters tall, and his body weighed more than 150 kilograms, but the tree trunk showed no signs of shaking at all. "Little black, little white, did you find anything?" Duan Lingtian looked at the two little pythons with a puzzled expression. Now he also realized that the two little pythons were not impulsive or suicidal, but had discovered something. "Hiss, hiss," Little Black nodded at Duan Lingtian, and its golden eyes stared at the cliff in front of it. Little White Silver eyes were now also staring at the cliff in front of it. "Is there a problem here?" Duan Lingtian stepped on the trunk of the crooked tree, slowly walked forward, and touched the cliff with a puzzled expression. Swoosh! A bolt of black lightning flashed past. It was the little black snake that had crashed into the cliff. Little Black. Duan Lingtian's expression changed greatly. Little Black crashed into the cliff at such a fast speed. Even if it could make a hole in the cliff, it would definitely be bounced down the bottomless abyss by the rebound force, and it would definitely die. However, in the next moment, the panic on Duan Lingtian's face disappeared, and it was replaced by astonishment. This was because Blackie's body had disappeared after it entered the cliff. There was a small hole in the cliff. Whoosh! At this time Little White also moved. It also made a hole in the cliff and disappeared into the cliff. Hiss, hiss, just when Duan Lingtian was still in a daze, the two little pythons made a small sound through the small hole that they drilled out of, and the sound of their tongues came into Duan Lingtian's ears. "Is there a different world inside?" Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed, and he seriously looked at the cliff in front of him. Chapter 263. Duan Lingtian noticed that around the area where the crooked tree pierced into, the area within a radius of 2 to 3 meters revealed traces of moisture, which was different from the cliffs in other places. Moreover, the color of the cliffs in this area was also slightly darker than the cliffs in other places. If one didn't carefully observe, one wouldn't be able to notice it. Hiss, hiss. The little python's voice came from behind the cliff, passing through the two small holes they pierced, and seemed to be urging Duan Lingtian to quickly enter. "You two little fellows wouldn't be thinking of making me follow you and crash in, right?" A wisp of a bitter smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth. He lowered his head and glanced at the bottomless abyss under the crooked tree, and a trace of coldness arose in his heart. Bang! Right at this moment, a loud bang sounded out, and the sound of collision came from the inside of the cliff. The sound of collision was heavy and powerful. Duan Lingtian knew that this commotion was surely caused by the two little fellows. Just when he was curious about what the two little fellows wanted to do, he instead noticed that the cliff in front of him actually cracked open, and numerous cracks spread out and extended. In the blink of an eye, these cracks seemed to have transformed into a spider web, enveloping half of the cliff. Could it be? Seeing this scene, Duan Lingtian's eyes couldn't help but light up, and at the same time he shouted in a low voice, "Blackie, Whitey, move aside." Hiss, hiss. The sound of the two little fellows flicking their tongues grew further and further away. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, his right hand formed into a fist, and his fist was suffused with origin energy. Above his head, 71 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form, floating in the air, ready to dash out at any moment. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian moved. His right arm abruptly pulled back as if it was pulled into half a bow. In the next moment, a perfectly straight punch seemed to have transformed into a cannonball, fiercely smashing towards the cliff in front of him. Bang! An ear-piercing explosion sounded out. The cliff that already had countless cracks was smashed into pieces by Duan Lingtian's punch. Rocks and stone fragments swirled in the air as they fell into the bottomless abyss, and not even the slightest sound of landing could be heard. Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up when he saw the scene behind the cliff. However, the shaking beneath his feet caused Duan Lingtian's expression to change greatly, and his heartbeat quickened. At this moment he was truly worried that he would fall into the bottomless abyss along with the crooked tree. Fortunately, at the critical moment, the swaying crooked tree calmed down and persevered. He's really playing with my heart. I almost had a heart attack. A wisp of a bitter smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth, and he felt a slight lingering fear in his heart. However, when his gaze returned to the space behind the shattered cliff once more, he seemed to have forgotten the fear he felt just now, and his face was filled with excitement. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian exerted a little force with his feet, and as if he had turned into a spirit snake, he swept into the space behind the cliff. Behind the cliff, there was indeed another world. It was a naturally formed cave passageway. If the two little pythons hadn't found this cave, even the Emperor Wu of Samsara at his peak wouldn't have been able to find it, let alone him. Ferocious beasts in some aspects were hard for humans to reach. Whoosh! Whoosh! The two little pythons turned into lightning and returned to Duan Lingtian's hands. They nodded to Duan Lingtian, and then wagged their tails and pointed inside the cave. You want me to go in and have a look? Duan Lingtian looked at the two little guys and smiled slightly. The two little guys hurriedly nodded like humans. Duan Lingtian breathed a sigh of relief, slightly relaxed his tense nerves, and stepped into the cave passageway. Even if the little pythons hadn't reminded him, he would have gone deep into the cave. This place was very strange and revealed mysteries everywhere, which made Duan Lingtian have a desire to explore it. This cave passageway was winding and winding. Not long after Duan Lingtian entered, he found that there was only darkness in front of him. However, this was not a problem. As Duan Lingtian ignited a wisp of elixir fire in his hands, the entire cave passageway suddenly became as bright as day, so that he could continue to move forward slowly. Hiss hiss. Suddenly, the two little pythons coiled around Duan Lingtian's hands seemed to have sensed something, and became abnormally agitated. Duan Lingtian took a few more steps. Whoosh! Whoosh! In an instant, the two little pythons turned into two streaks of lightning, one black and one white, and darted forward. Seeing this, Duan Lingtian did not hesitate and moved his body to follow. Spirit Serpent Body Technique. At the corner in front, Duan Lingtian discovered that the two little pythons had stopped. A pair of golden and a pair of silver eyes stared blankly into the distance. Duan Lingtian also looked over curiously. That is, Duan Lingtian saw that the end of the cave passageway in front of him was actually flickering with traces of gentle white light. Not only that, standing here, Duan Lingtian could also clearly feel the rhythm of the elemental energy in his body. The elemental energy in his dantian seemed to have begun to boil. What is that place? Duan Lingtian had an astonished expression, then extinguished the pill fire in his hand. At this place, there was already no need for the illumination of flames. Duan Lingtian brought along the two little pythons and walked step by step towards the end of the cave passageway. That place belonged to the center of the belly of Migres Peak. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian left the cave passageway and stepped into a space that was bright as day. Here the air was slightly gloomy and cold, and when Duan Lingtian had just entered, he couldn't help but shiver. But when he carefully sized up this place, he was completely dumbstruck. This space that was bright as day was around the size of an ordinary room. There was a natural pool in front of him, and within the pool was a pool of milky white liquid, drip. A clear sound entered his ears, and Duan Lingtian clearly saw a drop of milky white liquid fall into the pool, causing circles of ripples to spread out. Duan Lingtian abruptly raised his head and looked above him. A large expanse of stalactites appeared before his eyes. This stalactite, Duan Lingtian searched through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, and after a long while he came to a sudden realization, and his pupils couldn't help but constrict. This is 10,000-year stalactite? 10,000-year stalactite? According to the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, stalactite formed after 100 years could be used as medicine, but the effect was minimal. Stalactite formed after 1,000 years had extremely high effects, and could nourish elemental energy. To a certain extent, it could slightly increase one's martial talent. However, stalactite formed after 1,000 years was the best of the best. Once a 10,000-year stalactite was formed, its medicinal effect was even greater than a 1,000-year stalactite. 10,000-year stalactite, even Samsara Emperor Wu, who had experienced 2 lifetimes, had only encountered it once in his second lifetime. And it was precisely because of that one fortuitous encounter that allowed his martial talent to rise to an extremely monstrous level in his second lifetime, and the time he took to cultivate to the level of Emperor Wu was shortened by an entire half compared to his first lifetime. What did this mean? 10,000-year stalactite was able to increase one's natural talent in the martial Dao to a level that could be called monstrous. I'm rich, I'm rich. Duan Lingtian's face flushed red, and he was extremely excited. Never had he imagined that his luck would be so good. He'd only just entered the 7-star sword sect and had only just arrived at Migres Peak, yet he'd already encountered this 10,000-year stalactite that could only be chanced upon by luck and not sought after. Moreover, that pool of 10,000-year stalactite's milk at least had, Duan Lingtian thought in his heart, and he subconsciously looked towards the pool of milk in the pool. This glance caused his eyes to be on the verge of splitting apart. Little black, little white. Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted, and his voice was filled with an ear-piercing roar, and he was slightly exasperated. Heavens, what did I see? The two little pythons were currently greedily sucking on the 10,000-year stalactite's milk, and in next to no time, half of the large pool of milk was eaten by them, an entire half. At the instant that Duan Lingtian looked over, the two little pythons had already flipped over in satisfaction, and they fell asleep while holding onto their bulging bellies. On their bodies, gold markings and silver markings flickered with a faint brilliance. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth twitched, and he wished for nothing more than to dig out the 10,000-year stalactite's milk within the bellies of these two little fellows. So much 10,000-year stalactite's milk was swallowed by them in the blink of an eye. Duan Lingtian walked over and took out over 10 unused medicinal pill bottles. Then he put the remaining 10,000-year stalactite's milk into them. After he swept everything clean, Duan Lingtian raised his head to look at the 10,000-year stalactite's milk above him. But he noticed that the 10,000-year stalactite's milk hadn't dripped down for a long time. According to this speed, this 10,000-year stalactite's milk will probably only drip down a single drop every few months, Duan Lingtian guessed. These two little fellows swallowed so much 10,000-year stalactite's milk, and it can be considered to be a great fortune. I wonder what they'll become in the future. Duan Lingtian's gaze descended onto the two little pythons that had fallen asleep while holding onto their bellies, and he thought in his heart and was filled with curiosity. The two little pythons were both mutated fierce beasts, and their natural talent was extraordinary, not inferior to the little gold mouse that was a jade-eyed heavenly mouse. Now they'd swallowed so much 10,000-year stalactite's milk that could improve their natural talent, and they would surely be even more heaven-defying in the future. Although this place is cold, the spirit energy is oppressive. It's a good place to cultivate. Duan Lingtian found a stone platform at the side of the cave and sat on it. His eyes narrowed as he circulated the mental cultivation method of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Techniques WRM Python form. Duan Lingtian was able to clearly feel that the origin energy within his Dantian started to boil along with this place, and when he cultivated, his advancement was incomparably swift. Even the main peak of the 7-star sword sect, Dubhe Peak, the place with the most abundant spirit energy, might not be able to compare to this place. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. I never imagined that there's actually such a place on the 7-star sword sect's Migres Peak. This stalactite cave has already been formed for 10,000 years, and is even older than the history of the 7-star sword sect. The members of the 7-star sword sect obviously didn't notice this place, otherwise the 10,000-year stalactite's milk would have been completely plundered long ago. After an unknown amount of time, Duan Lingtian slowly opened his eyes. He noticed that his cultivation at the 4th level of the Origin Core stage had completely stabilized. I originally thought that I would need to spend at least 3 to 5 days to stabilize my cultivation, but I never imagined that it would be done in a single meditative cultivation within this 10,000-year stalactite cave. Chapter 264. The cultivation environment of the stalactite cave caused Duan Lingtian to be extremely shocked. If this place was discovered by the members of the 7-star sword sect, it would very likely be directly taken as a holy land. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but laugh in his heart when he thought up to this point. The 7-star sword sect had been established here for a few thousand years, yet they didn't notice the abnormality of Migres Peak. Now it was his turn. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian withdrew a pill bottle that was filled with the 10,000-year stalactite milk. He opened the bottle cap and directly drank it in one gulp. Instantly, Duan Lingtian felt a warm current fuse into his body, fuse into his fleshly body, vital energy, blood, bones. It practically covered every corner of his entire body. For a time, Duan Lingtian felt his body was comfortably warm, and the gloomy coldness of the stalactite cave didn't cause him to feel uncomfortable any longer. Continue. Duan Lingtian withdrew another pill bottle and swallowed the 10,000-year stalactite milk within. This time, the warm current converged from the 10,000-year stalactite milk once again covered Duan Lingtian's entire body. At the same time that the warmth on his body was even stronger, Duan Lingtian felt as if the pores on his entire body had opened up, and he felt indescribably carefree. Satisfying. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but exhale a mouthful of foul air. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian felt his body was sticky, and when he lowered his head to look, he noticed that the impurities in his body had been discharged quite a bit. Marrow cleansing. Duan Lingtian's gaze abruptly shone. He knew that his body had already been completely changed by the 2 bottles of 10,000-year stalactite milk. His current body could be considered to be the most suitable and perfect body for cultivation. My current body has already arrived at the limit of top natural talent. Duan Lingtian's body flickered with origin energy, and after removing all the impurities, he stretched his hands and feet and felt refreshed. So long as a certain amount of the 10,000-year stalactite milk was consumed, it would be able to completely change a person's physique and be reborn. The 2 bottles of 10,000-year stalactite milk allowed the Duan Lingtian to undergo a perfect rebirth. Even in the entire Cloud Continent, no one could surpass his current natural talent in the martial Dao. Of course, the Cloud Continent was so vast that it was difficult for an ordinary person to imagine it. Or perhaps in some corner of the Cloud Continent, there was someone that had a fortuitous encounter similar to Duan Lingtian and had also encountered the 10,000-year stalactite milk. Even so, it was impossible for the other party's talent to surpass Duan Lingtian's. At most, it was on par with Duan Lingtian's. Soon Duan Lingtian was stunned. This was because he discovered that his hands were no longer the bronze color of the sun. Instead, they had become white with a tinge of red. Duan Lingtian wanted to cry but had no tears. His skin was so tender that it was even better than Kerr's and little Feier's. My face. Suddenly, seeming to have thought of something, Duan Lingtian's face went grim, and he hurriedly stretched out his hand to touch his face. In next to no time his face completely collapsed. He noticed that his face was now smooth like jade and could be broken with a flick of a finger. The thing he didn't want to happen the most had still happened. Now he could already be considered to be a true pretty boy. I almost forgot, after consuming the 10,000-year stalactite milk, at the same time that the meridians and marrow are cleansed and reborn, the skin on the body will also return to the tender state of an infant. Duan Lingtian had a bitter smile on his face. How would he go out and face others in the future? Although he was vexed, Duan Lingtian knew that what was done couldn't be undone. He didn't think any further and returned his attention to the 10,000-year stalactite milk he'd collected. The 2 little fellows have eaten half of the 10,000-year stalactite milk. I've collected the remaining half into 18 pill bottles. I've consumed 2 bottles, so there's still 16 bottles left. 16 bottles, for bottles must be given to Kerr and little Fei, and I'll leave 2 bottles for mother. As for that little gold, she'll probably need at least 8 or 9 bottles. In this way it's more or less used up. Duan Lingtian sighed. There were too many monks and too little meat. After catching his breath, Duan Lingtian closed his eyes once more and continued to cultivate. 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, WRM Python form. Now that he cultivated, his advancement was an entire 2 times faster than before, and the effects of the 10,000-year stalactite milk were completely displayed. After a long time, Duan Lingtian opened his eyes when he felt hungry. After withdrawing a suckling pig from a spatial ring and roasting it, Duan Lingtian burped. Duan Lingtian glanced at the 2 little pythons and knew that they wouldn't wake up in a short period of time, so he didn't disturb them. After changing into the 7-star sword sect's outer court disciples' attire, Duan Lingtian walked out of the stalactite cave and once again arrived at the exit of the cliff. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian carefully sized up the exit of the cliff. He noticed that the crooked tree at the exit of the cliff was precisely because of the existence of the 10,000-year stalactite milk, and it had absorbed the nutrients that originated from the 10,000-year stalactite milk to survive. Moreover, it was far more tenacious than ordinary trees. After carefully inspecting the roots of the crooked tree and confirming that it wouldn't easily fall off the cliff, Duan Lingtian walked out of the cave at the side of the cliff and once again stepped onto the crooked tree. Duan Lingtian stood on the crooked tree, and what entered his eyes was an expanse of clouds and mist. Although there was a cave at the side of the cliff, he could imagine that unless a void stage expert intentionally approached it, otherwise, it would be utterly impossible to notice the existence of this cave. So, Duan Lingtian wasn't worried that someone would be able to find this place. However, Duan Lingtian still stayed on the crooked tree for a while, and only when his acute spiritual force didn't notice anyone on the peak of Migres Peak did he leap up and borrow the strength of the crooked tree to return to the peak of the mountain. I ought to have cultivated for an entire day and night. It's already the second day now. Duan Lingtian raised his head to look at the sky, and noticed that the scorching sun was high up in the sky, and it was precisely noon now. He still remembered that when he arrived at the peak of Migres Peak yesterday, it was already past noon. I'll go look for Kerr and little Fei. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a warm smile. Although he hadn't seen the two little girls for a day, he still missed them in his heart. Duan Lingtian left the peak of Migres Peak. All the way down to arrive near the chain bridge, Duan Lingtian saw the other Migres Peak outer court disciples. Under the numerous astounded gazes, Duan Lingtian walked onto the chain bridge. As expected, waves of boos sounded out behind him. That kid's skin is simply whiter and more tender than a woman's. Where did this pretty boy come from? A pretty boy like this is able to pass our 7-star sword sect's outer court disciple test and become an outer court disciple of our Migres Peak? Could it be that our 7-star sword sect's outer court disciple test is relaxed now? Duan Lingtian's body slightly stiffened when he heard the waves of discussion that sounded out from behind him. Sure enough, it was as he'd thought. His skin after being reborn was sufficient to draw strange gazes from others. All along the way, similar gazes and similar discussions caused Duan Lingtian to be almost numb. Finally, Duan Lingtian passed through the chain bridge and arrived at the stone platform of the main peak, Dubhe Peak. The stone platforms of Dubhe Peak that led to the other 6 peaks were all at the same height. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian went around to another stone platform, but he was quickly bewildered. He seemed to not know which stone platform led to the Alcade Peak. Finally, Duan Lingtian locked onto an outer court disciple that was passing by. Senior brother, do you know which stone platform the chain bridge that leads to Alcade Peak is at? Duan Lingtian stopped the outer court disciple and lightly smiled as he asked. This outer court disciple was a young man around the age of 23 or 24, and he had an astonished expression as he looked at Duan Lingtian. Obviously, he'd never seen a man with such good skin. Senior brother, do you know? Duan Lingtian frowned. Was there a need to be so exaggerated? Finally, the outer court disciple reacted and pointed behind him. If you continue forward, the second stone platform leads to Alcade Peak. Right when Duan Lingtian was about to thank the outer court disciple, the outer court disciple continued. But, junior brother, Alcade Peak only accepts female disciples. Although your skin is very very good, you're still a man after all. However, you are a man after all, so Alcade Peak will not accept you. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth twitched when he heard this, and his face darkened. Thank you for your reminder, senior brother, but I've never thought of joining Alcade Peak. I'm only going to look for someone. Ah. The outer court disciple laughed awkwardly when he heard this. Sorry, junior brother, I misunderstood you, I thought. But the outer court disciple hadn't finished speaking when he noticed that Duan Lingtian had already walked off into the distance. He couldn't help but shake his head and sigh, then muttered to himself. This junior brother's skin is white with a tinge of red. It's simply even more delicate than a woman's skin. If I can touch it, perhaps it would be even more comfortable than touching a woman. Duan Lingtian hadn't walked far when the outer court disciple's muttering sounded out by his ears. His body paused for a moment as he felt a wave of disgust, and the corners of his mouth twitched even more frequently. Duan Lingtian forcefully restrained his desire to turn around and beat up this outer court disciple, then walked towards the stone platform that led to Alcade Peak. Almost at the same time that Duan Lingtian stepped onto the chain bridge that led to Alcade Peak. On the chain bridge that led to Migres Peak, 2 figures walked side by side, and their target was Migres Peak. Huaxin, you should have directly taught him a lesson yesterday. These were 2 outer court disciples, and one of the young men said to the person beside him. If Duan Lingtian was here, he would surely be able to recognize the person that spoke. It was precisely one of the 3 7-star sword sect disciples that had a conflict with him in the restaurant in Black Bamboo City a few days ago. The 7-star sword sect outer court disciple that walked together with Huaxin. Yesterday, I wanted to go look for you and senior brother Fan and tell you about this matter. After all, senior brother Fan wished for nothing more than to skin that kid alive. But who would have thought that senior brother Fan actually went on a long journey at the last moment? Huaxin shook his head and slowly said, if I knew earlier that senior brother Fan had left, I would have made that kid lose a layer of skin yesterday. As he finished speaking, Huaxin's eyes flickered with a dense and fierce light. Alright, the important matter at hand is to find that kid. Migres Peak isn't big, but it isn't small either. If he has the intention to hide, then we're utterly unable to find him. A strand of fierce light flashed within the eyes of the other outer court disciple. Chapter 265. Duan Lingtian walked on the chain bridge that led to Alcate Peak, and many female disciples walked towards him, and their gazes descended onto him. Moreover, he noticed that most of these gazes were filled with jealousy. Duan Lingtian was slightly speechless. He really wanted to directly tell these female disciples, "I'm a man, what do all of you have to be jealous of?" Finally, Duan Lingtian endured extremely great pressure and arrived at the Alcate Peak stone platform. Behind the Alcate Peak stone platform was a vast building as well. This was exactly the same as Migres Peak. I presume the other 4 peaks ought to be similar as well. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart as he thought in his heart. This is a male disciple, right? The heavens are blind. To allow a man to possess such good skin, how good would it be if his skin was on my body? Smooth like jade and can be broken with a flick of the finger. The skin that we women yearn for even in our dreams. Waves of discussions entered into Duan Lingtian's ears, and it caused him to be unable to help but flee and directly enter Alcate Peak. As the saying goes, women are like tigers, and he could be considered to have completely experienced it today. But after entering Alcate Peak, Duan Lingtian was dumbstruck. Only now did he recall that Alcate Peak was so huge, and him going to look for Kerr and Little Fei like this was simply like looking for a needle in a haystack. Enduring the gazes of admiration and jealousy from the Alcate Peak female disciples all along the way, Duan Lingtian could only ask along the way, "Senior sister, do you know where the outer court female disciples that had just arrived at Alcate Peak yesterday are staying? Senior sister, have you seen 2 female disciples that are together? The new disciples that had just entered the 7-Star Sword sect yesterday and were brought to Alcate Peak by Elder Bai." "Senior sister, you?" Duan Lingtian asked all along the way but didn't have any clues, and a bitter smile instantly appeared on his face. "Those 2 junior sisters are really beautiful, no one in our Alcate Peak can compare to them. Not only our Alcate Peak, even in the entire 7-Star Sword sect, I'm afraid you won't be able to find a third woman that can compare to them in terms of appearance." However, Shi Yin doesn't seem to like them very much. She even asked them to move away. That Shi Yin is really something. Her 2 junior sisters don't even live in her canyon. They only live in the canyon next door. She actually wants to drive them away. It's not like you don't know that Shi Yin is famous for being jealous, and she always says that female disciples who are good-looking are seductresses, or something like that. According to me, it's she who's ugly and mentally warped, and she can't bear to see others doing well. If it wasn't for her brother being the #1 disciple in our 7-Star Sword sect's outer court, she would have been taught a lesson countless times long ago. 2 beautiful women were discussing as they walked towards Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up when he heard the 2 girls' words. There was a clue. "Senior sisters." Duan Lingtian stepped forward and greeted the 2 women with a smile. The 2 women were shocked when they saw Duan Lingtian, and their eyes were filled with envy as they looked at Duan Lingtian's skin that was smooth like jade and seemed like it would break with a flick of a finger. "Junior brother, how do you usually take care of yourself? Can you teach senior sister?" "Yeah, junior brother, aren't you taking care of yourself too well?" The 2 women were attracted by Duan Lingtian's fair and tender skin that was tinged with rosy, and they asked in a familiar manner. They'd completely forgotten that it was the first time they'd seen Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian's face slightly stiffened, and he said embarrassedly, "Senior sisters, I was born this way. Actually, I didn't want to." The 2 women rolled their eyes at Duan Lingtian. "Junior brother, you have such good skin we can't even be envious of it. Why do you seem to have an unwilling expression?" "Exactly, junior brother, you're too stimulating for us." What the 2 women said caused Duan Lingtian to be speechless. He was a man. Why would a man want skin that was as smooth as jade and could be broken with a flick of a finger? "Senior sisters." Duan Lingtian didn't give the 2 women a chance to speak again, and hurriedly asked, "The 2 new female disciples that you mentioned just now, do you know where they live?" One of the women sized up Duan Lingtian. "Junior brother, although you're not bad-looking, those 2 junior sisters are outstanding beauties. They might not take a fancy to you." "Yeah, junior brother, those kinds of beauties have high standards but low abilities. They might not pay attention to you." The other woman also said, "Senior sisters, I know them." Duan Lingtian smiled bitterly. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to find the 2 little girls, he wouldn't be bothered to waste time here with these 2 female disciples. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" One of the female disciples shook her head, and then turned her head to look behind her. Keep walking down this mountain path and turn right twice. You'll see a green stone tablet standing outside a canyon. Beside that canyon there's a small canyon. The two junior sisters that you're looking for live inside. Why didn't you say so earlier? The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth twitched when he heard this female disciple. Have you ever given me a chance? However, even though Duan Lingtian thought like this in his heart, he still thanked her, and searched all the way according to what the female disciple said. Finally, he saw the green stone tablet that the female disciple spoke of. This green stone tablet just happened to be standing outside a canyon, and there were 3 words carved on it. When he looked carefully, the words "belongs to Shi Yin" were carved on it. Shi Yin? Duan Lingtian frowned slightly. Only now did he recall that this Shi Yin was precisely the Alcate Peak female disciple that the 2 women mentioned in their conversation earlier. Moreover, that Shi Yin seemed to have bullied the 2 little girls of his family. Duan Lingtian coldly swept the canyon that Shi Yin lived in with his gaze. He took 2 steps forward and saw a small canyon that was overgrown with weeds. He knew that this ought to be the residence of the 2 little girls. Compared to the canyon that Shi Yin lived in, this place simply didn't seem like a place for people to live in. When he thought of how he would be able to see the 2 little girls soon, Duan Lingtian's face revealed a smile, and he walked out in large strides into the canyon. However, he'd only just walked into the canyon when Duan Lingtian heard a wave of sharp voice that was like the cry of a crow. You 2 seductresses, didn't I tell the 2 of you to scram out of this canyon yesterday? The sharp voice was filled with arrogance. Duan Lingtian frowned. Now even he felt that he might have walked into the wrong place. Right at this moment, Duan Lingtian heard a familiar voice. However, at this moment, the smile on his face completely froze. Senior Sister Shi Yin, this canyon of ours is separated from your canyon, and we don't interfere with each other. We've just arrived here, and it wasn't easy for us to find a residence like this. Can you not make things difficult for us? A voice that was like a silver bell sounded. It was Ker's voice. Duan Lingtian could hear that Ker's voice was mixed with a sense of grievance. It made Duan Lingtian's heart ache. Usually he doted on and loved Ker. He held her in the palm of his hand, afraid that she would fall away, afraid that she would melt in his mouth. Now there was actually someone who dared to make Ker feel wronged. Duan Lingtian's face was covered with a layer of cold frost, and his eyes flickered with a sharp light. He stood there as if he'd transformed into a bloodthirsty Azura that was about to devour people. Don't interfere with each other? The sharp voice that was like a crow's voice sounded again, and it was mixed with a sneer. Seductress, let me tell you, even if you live here, you won't be able to disturb me. As long as I don't want you to live here, you can't live here. The owner of the sharp voice spoke in a domineering tone. Why? Another voice that was as pleasant as an oriole sounded, and it was mixed with a sense of anger. Duan Lingtian could tell that this was Li Fei's voice. Li Fei was obviously enraged. Why? The sharp voice that was like a crow's sounded, and it was mixed with a sense of disdain. Since you asked why, then I'll tell you why. It's because I'm Shi Yin. You're so overbearing. Ker's voice was slightly anxious, but she didn't know how to refute the other party. That's right, I Shi Yin am overbearing, but so what? Who asked you 2 seductresses to be so loathsome? One look and I know that you're seductresses that seduce men. I Shi Yin hate people like you the most in my life. The sharp voice that was like a crow's sounded again, and it was mixed with a trace of jealousy. You want to drive us away just because of this? The anger that was mixed with Li Fei's voice was somewhat difficult to restrain. Exactly, it's because of this that I don't like the 2 of you and want to drive you away. Let me tell you, even if the 2 of you leave this place and change to another place. If there's a day when I'm in a bad mood, I might even drive the 2 of you away from that place. Seeing seductresses like the 2 of you makes me feel disgusted. Shi Yan's sharp voice that was like a crow's was filled with extreme jealousy, and when it entered into Duan Lingtian's ears, it caused Duan Lingtian to be unable to restrain himself any longer. His rage skyrocketed. I think it's you who's the most disgusting. Duan Lingtian's figure flashed as he executed the spirit serpent movement technique. It was as if he transformed into a spirit serpent, and in the blink of an eye, he flashed into the gorge. Presently within the gorge, there was a woman with crooked features that let down the audience. She was arrogantly looking at 2 beautiful women that were as beautiful as flowers. Of the 2 beautiful women, the face of the woman that had a devilish figure and an angelic face was flushed red, and her autumn eyes contained anger that was difficult to restrain. The other woman, who looked delicate and pitiful, had a trace of anger on her face. Duan Lingtian's sudden appearance became the center of attention for a moment. Who are you? Shi Yan turned around to look at Duan Lingtian. Her triangular eyes stared at Duan Lingtian as she asked in a sharp voice. However, Duan Lingtian didn't pay attention to Shi Yan. He completely treated Shi Yan as air and walked towards the other two women in large strides. Scoundrel? Young master? When Li Fei and Ke saw the current Duan Lingtian, they couldn't help but be stunned. Traces of astonishment appeared on their beautiful faces. Although Duan Lingtian was still Duan Lingtian, and his appearance hadn't changed at all. However, the skin on Duan Lingtian's face and the skin on his hands that were exposed was spotlessly white like jade. There was a tinge of red within the white, and there wasn't the slightest difference from the skin of a baby. This caused Li Fei and Ke to be slightly stupefied. How did their man become like this? It had to be said that at this moment, even they couldn't help but feel a trace of jealousy in their hearts. Chapter 266. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a bitter smile, and he naturally noticed the surprised gazes of the two little girls. What? You don't recognize me? Duan Lingtian shook his head and laughed, and his tone contained a sense of helplessness. He didn't want it to be like this as well. Only now did Li Fei and Ke recover from their shock, and they walked over to Duan Lingtian in large strides. Scoundrel, how did you become like this? Li Fei blinked her beautiful eyes as she asked with a curious expression. Yeah, young master, your skin is even fairer than mine and big sister Fei's. Ke spoke in all seriousness as well. Actually, amongst all the women Duan Lingtian had seen, only Princess Bai Yao and Xiaolan could compare to the skin of Li Fei and Ke. However, compared to his skin that had been reborn, it was still far inferior. After all, his skin was comparable to a baby now. After Duan Lingtian disregarded her, Shi Yan who stood at the side had an expression of disbelief. When did someone dare disregard her like this? Now, when she saw Duan Lingtian chatting happily with Li Fei and Ke, Shi Yan's features practically warped, and her sharp voice that was like a crow's had frightening coldness mixed within. Pretty boy, I'm talking to you? Who the hell are you? Shi Yan's voice forcefully interrupted the words Duan Lingtian was about to say to Li Fei and Ke, and it caused Duan Lingtian's face to be unable to help but darken. But when his gaze touched Li Fei and Ke, it transformed into boundless gentleness. I forgot that there's a crow at the side disturbing us. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled to Li Fei and Ke before turning around to look at Shi Yan, and the gloominess on his face reappeared, and his eyes flickered with a frightening sheen. Crow. Hearing Duan Lingtian's description of Shi Yan, Li Fei and Ke were stunned. Then they came back to their senses and burst into laughter. Their laughter was charming and charming. You dare to call me crow? Shi Yan was stunned as well. She looked at Duan Lingtian with a face full of disbelief. You just called me crow? Duan Lingtian frowned. Thinking of Shi Yan's threat to his two women, he didn't want to show any mercy to Shi Yan. Is there something wrong with your ears? However, your voice is like a crow's, but your looks are even worse than a crow's. His looks were even worse than a crow's? Shi Yan was completely dumbfounded. After a moment of absent-mindedness, her pair of triangular eyes flashed with a frightening luster. Boy, do you know who I am? She'd entered the 7-Star Sword sect for 2 years, and it was the first time someone dared to speak to her like this, and it was right in front of her. Aren't you Shi Yan? Duan Lingtian said indifferently, and his gaze was incomparably calm. You know me? And you dare humiliate me? Shi Yan looked at Duan Lingtian with a dumbstruck expression. Humiliate you? Duan Lingtian couldn't help but laugh when he heard Shi Yan, and after laughing his face sank as he said coldly, I only said you're a crow and that's humiliating you? You can't take it? Then why don't you think about what my woman was thinking when you humiliated her? Your women? Shi Yan's gaze descended onto the two women by Duan Lingtian's side. They're your women? Umph. Duan Lingtian's gaze was icy cold as he stared at Shi Yan with a cold and indifferent expression, yet he didn't intend to answer her. In this way, you're one of the outer court disciples that entered the 7-Star Sword sect with them yesterday? Shi Yan looked at Duan Lingtian with a piercingly cold light in her eyes as she spoke in a low voice. So what if I am? Duan Lingtian's voice was terrifyingly calm, and only those who were familiar with him would know that this was the calm before he went berserk. Ha! Shi Yan started laughing loudly, and her distorted features seemed to be slightly ghastly and terrifying, and her pair of triangular eyes seemed to be telling of her warped heart. Young master. Ke timidly moved closer to Duan Lingtian, then extended her hand to hold onto Duan Lingtian's arm. Duan Lingtian patted the back of Ker's hand, then lightly smiled to her and gave her a reassuring gaze. A trace of a light smile appeared on Ker's nervous face when she saw this. Li Fei frowned and shuddered in her heart as she looked at Shi Yan, who was laughing heartily. Finally, Shi Yan stopped laughing, and her pair of triangular eyes stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. Kid, an outer court disciple that has just entered the seven-star sword sect actually dares to be arrogant in front of me, Shi Yan? Although, I know that you want to show off in front of these two seductresses. But unfortunately you chose the wrong person. Today I, Shi Yan, will let you know who you can't afford to offend. Once you offend them, you'll have to pay a painful price for your entire life. Shi Yan took a step forward, her body emitted traces of coldness, and her cold triangular eyes descended onto Duan Lingtian. I'm extremely curious, when this pretty boy's cultivation is crippled, will these two seductresses still be willing to accompany by your side? Ah. As Shi Yan spoke, she started laughing loudly. It was as if she'd already seen the scene of Duan Lingtian's cultivation being crippled by her, causing him to be in so much pain that he wished he was dead and deserted by everyone. Duan Lingtian frowned slightly. Now he was finally able to understand what those two Alcade Peak female disciples said earlier. This Shi Yan was indeed prone to jealousy, and her mentality was warped, and she couldn't bear to see others being better than her. After living 2 lifetimes, it was still the first time he'd seen such a strange woman. It caused him to feel loathing from the bottom of his heart. Duan Lingtian's face sank when he heard Shi Yan's threat. You want to cripple my cultivation? I'm extremely curious, on what basis? On what basis? Shi Yan sneered, and her pair of eyes stared at Duan Lingtian. On the basis that I, Shi Yan, have a 7-star sword sect's #1 outer court disciple as my older brother. Right, I forgot to tell you, once my older brother returns from his training outside this time, he'll be able to become an inner court disciple. I, Shi Yan, have a quasi-inner court disciple older brother. Even if I cripple your cultivation, so long as I don't kill you, the sect will surely take my older brother's face into consideration and exempt me from punishment. You're only an outer court disciple that has just entered the sect, and in front of me, your life is lowly like grass. A narrow sword appeared out of thin air in Shi Yan's hand, and origin energy flowed within it as it flickered with an icy cold sheen. Above her, 75 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. 4th level of the origin core stage. Grade 7 spirit weapon? Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he recognized Shi Yan's cultivation and the grade of the spirit weapon in her hand with a glance. My life is lowly like grass. Duan Lingtian looked at Shi Yan with a slightly grim face, and his eyes flickered with a frightening cold light. Do you really think that your life is so precious? It's surely more precious than your life. Shi Yan's voice was cold and indifferent, and her triangular eyes were suffused with an icy cold sheen as she leaned forward and instantly moved. Instantly, Shi Yan seemed to have transformed into a gust of wind that flashed directly towards Duan Lingtian. Whoosh! The narrow sword in her hand whistled out, blossoming with tens of sword images, causing one to be unable to distinguish the real sword images. The sword images that covered the sky whistled as they descended, enveloping down towards Duan Lingtian. Instantly, the weeds in the area where she and Duan Lingtian were at were swept by a shapeless strong wind, and danced about. The shapeless strong wind spread out, blowing the 7-star sword sect outer court disciple attire on Duan Lingtian, and it fluttered in the wind. Duan Lingtian's face sank when faced with the sword images that covered the sky that Shi Yan executed. A cold light flashed within his eyes, and a 3-foot-long blade appeared in his hand. This sword was precisely the possession of the Spectre Guard, Shui Yun. Shui Yun, the father of the former Crimson Sky Kingdom's Imperial City Guard Army commander, Shui Lu. That day, for the sake of taking revenge for his son and grandson, he descended to the embroidered uniform guard's residence with the intention of killing Duan Lingtian. But unfortunately in the end he was still killed by the 2 half-step void stage old men by Duan Lingtian's side. This grade 7 spirit sword of his had fallen into Duan Lingtian's hands as well. Shi Yan's sharp voice tore through the sky, and the sword images that covered the sky aimed towards Duan Lingtian's dantian as they whistled out, wanting to destroy Duan Lingtian's dantian in one go. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a cold smile. The Shi Yan was actually so ruthless. Duan Lingtian moved. His figure didn't move, but the hand that held the sword flashed out. Dazzling origin energy instantly skyrocketed and raged on the grade 7 spirit sword. At the same time, Almost 90 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form in the sky above Duan Lingtian. 5th level of the Origin Core stage. Grade 7 spirit weapon. Shi Yan's sharp voice sounded out once again, and mixed within was terror that arose from the bottom of her heart. Never had she imagined that an outer court disciple that looked to be around 20 years old, or even perhaps not even 20 years old, would actually have such a terrifying cultivation. She wanted to withdraw her hand and dodge, but it was too late. A trace of regret arose within her heart. You've been caught in a trap of your own making. Duan Lingtian sneered, and the 3-foot-long blade in his hand whistled out, giving rise to a wave of ear-piercing howls and a piercingly cold strong wind. Sword-drawing arts. With only a single sword strike, Duan Lingtian found the location of Shi Yan's true sword strike from the sword images that covered the sky, and he moved to intercept it. Clang. The sound of collision sounded out. Duan Lingtian's strength of almost 90 ancient mammoths completely suppressed Shi Yan's strength of 75 ancient mammoths. Shi Yan's hand shook, the web between her thumb and index finger split open, dripping with fresh blood, and the narrow sword in her hand flew out. Oh! Shi Yan's pupils constricted when she saw Duan Lingtian's sword whistling towards her, and her voice contained terror mixed within. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian's hand shook, and the 3-foot-long blade finally avoided Shi Yan's body, flashing to the side. Shi Yan heaved a sigh of relief, and she gave Duan Lingtian a gaze that said, "At least you're sensible." But in the next moment, her face went pale once more, because she noticed that even though this outer court disciple swung away the sword that stabbed towards her, his legs swept over once more, and it carried along a terrifying force that flashed straight towards her dantian. At the same time that Duan Lingtian kicked out, his gaze was icy cold. Didn't this Shi Yan want to cripple my cultivation? Now, I'll let her have a taste of having her cultivation crippled. No. No. Chapter 267. Bang. Shi Yan's body flew out like an arrow that left the bow before fiercely crashing onto the ground and spitting out a mouthful of blood. Ah! Shi Yan's voice that was sharp like a crow emitted an ear-piercing and unpleasant shrill cry. Subsequently, she struggled to stand up, and her triangular eyes stared at Duan Lingtian as they emitted dense sorrow and hatred. You crippled my dantian. You actually crippled my dantian. I won't let you off, I won't let you off. After she finished speaking, Shi Yan held her dantian, picked up her grade 7 spirit sword, and walked out of the gorge with large strides. Her facial features, which were already twisted together, were now completely twisted together. Duan Lingtian's face sank when he heard Shi Yan's threat, and killing intent arose in his heart. As far as he was concerned, even if he killed Shi Yan now, so long as he destroyed the corpse and destroyed the evidence, there would absolutely be no one that would suspect him and the 2 little girls. This Shi Yan was a 4th-level Origin Core stage outer court disciple. Whereas the 3 of them were outer court disciples that had just entered the 7-star sword sect yesterday. In the eyes of others, it was impossible for the 3 of them to kill Shi Yan. But, right when Duan Lingtian took a step forward and intended to kill Shi Yan, Ker's hand that held onto his arm tightened slightly, and her pair of clear eyes that were like water looked at Duan Lingtian as she lightly shook her head. Duan Lingtian sighed in his heart, and didn't make a move against Shi Yan in the end. Ker was still too kind. Shi Yan, your cultivation ground, I want it. Duan Lingtian looked at Shi Yan's figure as his cold and indifferent voice sounded out, and it was incomparably overbearing. Shi Yan's body stopped when she heard Duan Lingtian, then she turned around to look at Duan Lingtian, and her triangular eyes emitted bloodthirsty hatred that wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. You'll regret it. Shi Yan's voice seemed as if it came from an icy cave, and it was filled with extreme icy coldness. Duan Lingtian smiled lightly as he'd heard similar vicious words too many times and had long since become numb to it. Let's go to your new home. Duan Lingtian stretched out his hands, took the 2 girls' hands and walked out of the canyon. Creak, creak. An abrupt voice sounded out as a fluffy little head stretched out from beneath Ker's sleeve, and it was precisely the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse looked at Ker, and her jade-green eyes flickered with a trace of displeasure. Ker, did you offend Xiaojin? Seeing this, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but laugh. In his impression, Ker had always doted on the little gold mouse the most. Logically speaking, it was impossible for her to anger the little gold mouse. Scoundrel, little sister Ker didn't offend little Jean? It's little Jean who doesn't like Shi Yan and wants to help little sister Ker vent her anger, but little sister Ker doesn't let it do anything, so it's unhappy. Li Fei lightly smiled as she explained to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding, and he glanced at the little gold mouse as a wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. Little Jean doesn't know how to control its strength. If it kills that Shi Yin, then it'll cause a great calamity. Kerr stroked the little gold mouse's fluffy body as she spoke in a light voice. Kerr, you're too kind. Duan Lingtian shook his head, yet didn't continue speaking. Because he knew that Kerr's character was like this, and unless someone aroused killing intent towards her and the people by her side, she would only be ruthless. Otherwise, just like before, she wouldn't easily choose to kill someone. The scale in Kerr's heart was different from his. To him, killing all threats in the cradle was the right path. However, since Kerr had stopped him earlier, he'd go with the flow and let Shi Yin go. At any rate, as far as he was concerned, even if that Shi Yin didn't die, she wouldn't be able to pose the slightest threat to him. After walking out of the gorge, Duan Lingtian once again saw the azure stone tablet. Umph. Duan Lingtian's gaze flickered as he kicked out, and his origin energy exploded out. Bang. The stone tablet instantly shattered, transforming into a pile of shattered rocks. Duan Lingtian brought along the two little girls to walk into the gorge that originally belonged to Shi Yin. Within the gorge there was the sound of birds chirping and the fragrance of flowers, and besides that, there was a spacious wooden house. The environment here isn't bad. Duan Lingtian's face revealed a trace of a smile. That Shi Yin isn't very good looking, yet she knows how to live her life. Li Fei and Kerr's beautiful eyes lit up with a trace of an excited sheen when they saw the environment within the gorge. Scoundrel, you still haven't told us how you became like this? Li Fei looked at Duan Lingtian with a bewildered expression. Duan Lingtian noticed that Kerr had looked over as well, and her beautiful eyes were bright as snow. Obviously, the two little girls were extremely interested in the changes he'd undergone. Do the two of you want to become like me? Duan Lingtian blinked his eyes as he asked the two little girls. Yes. Li Fei and Kerr practically spoke in unison, and their eyes flickered with flowing lights of anticipation as they stared at Duan Lingtian with burning gazes. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse lay on Kerr's shoulder and stared at Duan Lingtian with great interest. Little Gold, what are you joining in on the fun for? Duan Lingtian stretched out his hand to grab the little gold mouse in his hand before casually throwing it to the ground at the side. Squeak squeak. The little gold mouse lay on the ground and cried out twice at Duan Lingtian with dissatisfaction. Then it leaped up and descended within Kerr's sleeve before sticking out its cute little head to stare straight at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian shook his head and didn't continue playing with the little gold mouse. With a raise of his hand, four medicinal pill bottles appeared in his hand, and he passed them to the two little girls. Kerr, Little Fei, each of you have 2 bottles and drink the contents within. After you drink it, both of you will become like me. The contents of the 4 medicinal pill bottles was precisely the 10,000-year stalactite milk. Li Fei and Kerr had unconditional trust towards Duan Lingtian, and after they received the medicinal pill bottles, they directly removed the stopper and swallowed the milk within. Squeak squeak. When the 2 young girls opened the medicinal pill bottles, the little gold mouse's jade green eyes abruptly lit up and flickered with a dazzling sheen. When it saw the 2 young girls drinking all the milk, it shook its head, and its eyes seemed to emit a trace of disappointment. In next to no time, Li Fei and Kerr's beautiful eyes couldn't help but focus. I feel my body is burning up. Li Fei's eyes lit up and she was slightly surprised. Me too. Kerr nodded as well. In next to no time, the 2 young girls noticed that the pores on their bodies had opened up, and many impurities were discharged from their pores, emitting a wave of fishy smell. This caused them to be astounded, and after they recovered from their shock, they hurriedly circulated their origin energy to remove these impurities. Young master, what did you give us to drink? Kerr looked at Duan Lingtian with a curious expression. She could feel that her body was slightly lighter than before, and her entire body was comfortable and indescribably comfortable. This. Li Fei instead stared blankly at her pair of slender hands that were smooth like jade and incomparably white like jade. Little sister Kerr, I'm not dreaming, right? Kerr withdrew her gaze from Duan Lingtian and moved it onto Li Fei, then she looked at Li Fei's face and stared with her eyes wide open. Big sister Fei, you're so beautiful. Li Fei's beautiful face was already beautiful like an angel, and now that she'd consumed the 10,000-year stalactite milk, her beauty had increased slightly, causing one to be unable to help but be immersed in it with a single glance and be unable to extricate themselves. Little sister Kerr, you've become even more beautiful as well. Li Fei's gaze was attracted by Kerr's beautiful face as well, as Kerr was just like her, as if she'd become a completely different person. In next to no time, the two young girls withdrew a mirror from their spatial rings, and when they saw their current appearances, delight suffused their faces. Everyone had the heart to love beauty. Not to mention the two young girls were already drop-dead gorgeous, and now that they'd consumed the 10,000-year stalactite milk, they were even more charming. A wisp of a satisfied smile appeared on Duan Lingtian's face. These were his women. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse under Ker's sleeve stuck its head out to stare at Duan Lingtian, and its jade-green eyes were filled with anticipation and yearning. What? You want it as well? Duan Lingtian looked at the little gold mouse and the corners of his mouth held a smile as he asked. The little gold mouse nodded like a human, and its jade-green eyes flashed with a trace of a fawning flowing light. When he saw the little gold mouse like this, Duan Lingtian didn't tease it any longer, and he withdrew a bottle of 10,000-year stalactite milk for the little gold mouse to drink. Unexpectedly, after the little gold mouse drank it instead looked at Duan Lingtian with a desire to continue. So long as you're obedient, I'll give you a bottle every once in a while. Duan Lingtian spoke to the little gold mouse. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse understood Duan Lingtian's words, and although it was slightly disappointed, it still cried out as it nodded, as if it was guaranteeing Duan Lingtian that it would surely be obedient. It wasn't that Duan Lingtian was stingy, but he really didn't dare allow the little gold mouse to drink too much now. Otherwise, once the little gold mouse fell asleep like Little Black and Little White, he would be unable to continue protecting the two little girls. Duan Lingtian wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. In his heart, the safety of the two little girls surpassed everything else. Although the two little girls had many offensive inscriptions he'd inscribed, those inscriptions had to be used in time to be effective, and if they were slightly late, then they would be doomed eternally. This caused him to be slightly worried. As far as he was concerned, it was safer to let the little gold mouse protect the two little girls. In next to no time, Li Fei and Ke finally recovered from their shock, and their gazes descended onto Duan Lingtian at the same time. Scoundrel, what did you give us to drink? Li Fei couldn't refrain herself from asking. As far as she was concerned, what had happened today was truly too miraculous, and it was simply like a dream. Ke looked at Duan Lingtian with a curious expression as well. What the two of you drank is good stuff. 10,000-year stalactite milk. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he spoke. But unfortunately, the two little girls had utterly never heard of 10,000-year stalactite milk, so their expressions were still calm and didn't change in the slightest. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse's jade-green eyes lit up when it heard Duan Lingtian, and the gaze it shot at Duan Lingtian burned even hotter. Little gold, could it be that you know what that 10,000-year stalactite milk is? After Ke noticed the little gold mouse's reaction, she asked curiously. Someone's coming? Before the little gold mouse could reply, Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he spoke out vigilantly, whereas the little gold mouse leaped back into Ke's sleeve. Duan Lingtian stood by the side of the two little girls as he gazed out of the gorge. A few figures walked in with large strides. Elder Bai, it's them. They joined forces to launch a sneak attack on me and crippled my Dantian. Chapter 268. When he heard this signature voice, Duan Lingtian didn't have to look to know who it was. Although he'd long since guessed that Shi Yan wouldn't let the matter go, he never imagined that Shi Yan would return so quickly. Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he looked at the beautiful woman in the lead of the three people that walked in, as he recognized her with a single glance. It was precisely Elder Bai who'd led the group of new female disciples to Arcade Peak yesterday. Behind Elder Bai, Shi Yan had an exasperated expression, and her gaze of hatred converged onto him, as if she was about to swallow him up. Duan Lingtian couldn't be bothered to pay attention to Shi Yan, and his gaze descended onto the other person behind Elder Bai. This was a delicate and pretty female disciple around the age of 23 or 24. The gaze this female disciple shot at Shi Yan from time to time contained a trace of disgust mixed within. Obviously, Shi Yan didn't have a good relationship with the people on Arcade Peak. When Elder Bai and the delicate and pretty female disciple saw Duan Lingtian for the first time, their eyes flashed with a trace of an astonished sheen. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a bitter smile. Looks like from today onwards I have to bask in the sun more. I must tan my skin. As for the changes on Li Fei and Ke, they weren't very obvious. If one wasn't familiar with them, it would be extremely difficult to notice the minute changes on them. Elder Bai. Duan Lingtian looked at the beautiful woman and lightly nodded. Li Fei and Ke followed suit and greeted her. I remember the two of you. You're the new disciples that followed me back to Alcade Peak yesterday. Elder Bai's gaze descended onto Li Fei and Kerr, then she looked at Duan Tian and asked, "Looking at your age, you ought to be less than 20, right?" "I'll be 20 in a while." Duan Tian nodded, and was slightly curious in his heart. Why is Elder Bai asking this? "You're also a new disciple that just entered the sect yesterday?" Elder Bai asked again. "Yes." Duan Tian nodded. Elder Bai frowned, then turned around to look at Shi Yan behind her and asked indifferently, "Shi Yan, what actually happened? You said these 3 new disciples that just entered the sect joined forces to launch a sneak attack on you and crippled your Dantian?" As far as she was concerned, this was simply an unbelievable thing. Of these 3 new disciples, besides the young woman who was around 21 or 22 years old, the other young man and young woman, they seemed to be less than 20 years old. Just the 3 of them had the ability to launch a surprise attack on Shi Yan, who was at the 4th level of the Origin Core stage. Moreover, they even crippled Shi Yan's Dantian? She had a feeling that the matter was absolutely not as simple as Shi Yan said. "Yes, Elder Bai. Elder to cripple Mises Tit Lingto Lingtian's 2s to heavily injures crippled Dantian's script Dantian T to Dantian Alcade, T Dantian Tit to steal. TT of, S is of, you're talking nonsense." Kerr looked at Shi Yan, and she was angered to the point her beautiful face flushed red, and her delicate figure lightly trembled. Li Fei looked at Shi Yan with a gaze that contained icy coldness. She never imagined that Shi Yan would actually be so shameless and speak without thinking. Only Duan Tian had a calm expression, as if all this wasn't related to him. Elder Bai noticed Duan Tian's composure as well, and she was slightly surprised in her heart as she asked, "What do you say about this matter?" Duan Tian smiled indifferently. "Elder Bai, what this Shi Yan said is only her side of the story, and there isn't any evidence." Elder Bai hadn't spoken when Shi Yan had already shouted with a stern voice, "My Dantian that was crippled by you all is the best evidence." "Your Dantian that was crippled by us?" Duan Tian laughed. "Who knows if you fell down while walking then broke your own Dantian? What? You want to frame us because we've occupied your cultivation area?" The beautiful female disciple behind Duan Tian had a smile in her beautiful eyes when she heard Duan Tian, and she was amused by what Duan Tian said. Elder Bai glanced deeply at Duan Tian, then spoke once more with a tone that contained a sense of seriousness mixed within. "Shi Yan, think clearly before you speak. If I find out that you deceived me, then I'll expel you from Alcade Peak right away." Shi Yan's face went grim when she heard this, and in the end she gritted her teeth and finally spoke the truth of the matter. After they finished listening to Shi Yan, Elder Bai and the beautiful female disciple behind her were stunned, and their gazes simultaneously descended onto Duan Tian, and their eyes revealed slight astonishment. They never imagined that the strength of this new disciple that had just entered the sect was actually able to firmly suppress Shi Yan. In other words, he was at least a 4th-level Origin Core martial artist. Almost 20 years old, 4th-level Origin Core martial artist. Even if placed in the 7-star sword sect, such natural talent was extremely rare. In next to no time, Elder Bai's gaze descended onto Shi Yan, and a strand of coldness flashed within her eyes. "Shi Yan, you actually dared lie in front of me with the intention of framing another? How should you be punished?" Shi Yan's face was ghastly pale and she gritted her teeth. "Elder Bai, Shi Yan knows her crime. But he crippled my Dantian, isn't his crime even greater? I ask Elder Bai to give Shi Yan justice and cripple his Dantian as well." Elder Bai's face sank. "Shi Yan, in the past I heard the disciples of the peak say that you're vicious. Today I can be considered to have completely experienced it. Let me ask you, did the 2 of them staying in that empty small gorge affect you?" Shi Yan shook her head. "Since they didn't, then why did you expel them? Could it be that it's like what the disciples of the peak said, so long as it's a female disciple with good looks, you're jealous of them from the bottom of your heart?" As she finished speaking, cold lights flashed within Elder Bai's beautiful eyes. Shi Yan's body lightly trembled, and her eyes emitted a vicious sheen as it descended onto the 2 girls by Duan Tian's side. On what basis? On what basis are they so beautiful like flowers when they were born? Whereas I was born with such an appearance. On what basis? Elder Bai's face was livid as she looked at Shi Yan, who seemed to have gone mad, and she shouted out an order. "Zuoqing, I don't want to see her on Alcade Peak again." Elder Bai's order was obviously to expel Shi Yan from the 7-star sword sect. "No. Elder Bai, no." Shi Yan's face went gloomy. "Yes, master." The delicate and pretty girl behind Elder Bai nodded, and a trace of taking pleasure in Shi Yan's misfortune flashed within her beautiful eyes as she directly walked toward Shi Yan. "Bitch, don't come over." Shi Yan's face went grim as she glared angrily at Zuoqing. Zuoqing's face sank, and with a raise of her hand, origin energy suffused out as it slapped down, directly knocking Shi Yan unconscious. "Don't make too much of this matter," Elder Bai instructed. "Yes," Zuoqing replied, then took the unconscious Shi Yan and left. "Thank you, Elder Bai, for upholding justice for us." Li Fei beamed with joy as she looked at Elder Bai and thanked her. "Thank you, Elder Bai." Kerr hurriedly thanked her as well. Elder Bai looked at these two young girls whose appearances could be said to be drop-dead gorgeous, and lightly smiled. "What are the cultivations of the two of you?" Li Fei and Kerr glanced at the nearby Duan Lingtian when they heard this. When they saw Duan Lingtian lightly smile and nod, they once again looked at Elder Bai and said in unison. "Elder Bai, we're both at the third level of the Origin Core stage." Third level of the Origin Core stage. Elder Bai was stunned when she heard what Li Fei and Kerr said. Really? When she saw the 40 ancient mammoth silhouettes that had respectively condensed into form above Li Fei and Kerr, she finally completely confirmed it, and traces of shock appeared on her face. "You. Are you willing to become my disciple?" Elder Bai's gaze descended onto Li Fei, and her eyes contained slight anticipation mixed within. Li Fei once again looked at Duan Lingtian when she heard this. This caused Elder Bai to be stunned. "Who the heck is this young man to us?" "It's your fortune that Elder Bai wants to take you as her disciple." Duan Lingtian nodded to Li Fei. As far as he was concerned, once Li Fei became Elder Bai's disciple, even if she couldn't do as she pleased on Arcade Peak in the future, at least there wouldn't be any female disciples that would dare bully her. "Greetings, Master." Li Fei hurriedly looked at Elder Bai and said respectfully. Good. Elder Bai's face was filled with smiles, and with a raise of her hand, a 3-foot-long blade appeared in her hand. Duan Lingtian discerned with a single glance that this was a grade 7 spirit sword. The sword was like autumn water, and it emitted a piercingly cold light. "Take this 7th grade spiritual sword as Master's gift for our first meeting." Elder Bai passed the grade 7 spirit sword in her hand to Li Fei. Li Fei extended her hand to receive it. "Thank you, Master." Subsequently, Li Fei saw Elder Bai look at Kerr but didn't speak for a long time, so she hurriedly said, "Master, little sister Kerr's natural talent far surpasses mine. I'm afraid it won't be long before she'll be able to step into the 4th level of the Origin Core stage." Li Fei tried her best to promote Kerr. "Big Sister Fei, I'm extremely happy that you're able to become Elder Bai's disciple." Kerr lightly smiled to Li Fei and shook her head. "Kerr will surely be able to break through to the 4th level of the Origin Core stage within a month." Duan Lingtian looked at Elder Bai. He felt it was slightly strange as well. Since this Elder Bai had taken little Fei as her disciple, why didn't she take Kerr as her disciple? Kerr's natural talent wasn't the slightest bit inferior to Li Fei. Moreover, because Kerr had followed him since long ago, her cultivation steadily surpassed Li Fei. Will surely be able to break through to the 4th level of the Origin Core stage within a month? Elder Bai was stunned when she heard Duan Lingtian, then she looked at Duan Lingtian with eyes that contained slight bewilderment mixed within. "Yes." Duan Lingtian nodded. This was something he was incomparably sure of. The current Kerr wasn't the past Kerr any longer. After experiencing the rebirth of the 10,000-year stalactite milk, Kerr's current natural talent was no different than his. With Kerr's current cultivation, breaking through to the 4th level of the Origin Core stage within a month wasn't a difficult thing. Duan Lingtian's words caused Kerr to be unable to help herself from being slightly shocked. Even she herself wasn't confident in being able to break through to the 4th level of the Origin Core stage within a month. Why was the young master so confident in her? Although she was bewildered, she didn't open her mouth to refute. She already had a plan in her heart. In the following month she must cultivate even more painstakingly. Our Arcade Peak hasn't produced such an outstanding female disciple like you. Chapter 269. Elder Bai's words caused Duan Lingtian's brows to slightly wrinkle. This Elder Bai wouldn't be sick, right? Could it be that with Kerr's talent she still didn't have the qualifications to be her disciple? Elder Bai, if you're not willing to accept little sister Kerr as your disciple, then I won't acknowledge you as my master. I'm sorry. Li Fei extended her hand to hold Kerr's hand and looked towards Elder Bai with a firm expression. These few years she and Kerr had long since become as close as sisters, and it was difficult to distinguish between you and me. Now that Elder Bai treated Kerr like this, it also caused dissatisfaction to arise in her heart. You won't accept little sister Kerr, right? Then I won't acknowledge you as my master either. Big sister Fei, I know you're good to me but you can't be like this. Only Kerr had a calm expression without the slightest trace of unhappiness. After hearing Li Fei's words she hurriedly persuaded, Elder Bai will be unhappy if you act like this. Truly a sensible girl. Elder Bai wasn't angry and glanced at Kerr with admiration, then looked towards Li Fei. You little girl, you wouldn't be thinking that I'm unwilling to accept this little sister of yours as my disciple, right? Could it be that you're not? Now when facing Elder Bai, Li Fei was less courteous. You little girl. Sensing the indignation in Li Fei's tone, Elder Bai shook her head and smiled. I said I won't accept her as my disciple, not because I don't fancy her, but because I want her to have a better choice. A better choice? Duan Lingtian's brows raised, his heart slightly moved as he somewhat didn't understand Elder Bai's meaning. Not only did he not understand, even Li Fei didn't understand. Elder Bai, what do you mean by this? Elder Bai lightly smiled and said, Silly girl, you still don't understand what I mean? I've already thought about it. I'll recommend this girl to the Peak Master later on. It just so happens that the Peak Master has always been looking for a closed-door disciple. Now it's good, with this girl's aptitude, the Peak Master will surely like her. Peak Master? Hearing Elder Bai's words, Duan Lingtian's eyes suddenly brightened. There was a sect leader and 6 vice-sect leaders in the 7-star sword sect. The sect leader controlled the main peak of the 7-star sword sect, Dubhe Peak, whereas the other 6 vice-sect leaders controlled the other 6 peaks. These 6 vice-sect leaders were also known as peak leaders. Li Fei also came to her senses. What Duan Lingtian knew was also from Xiongquan. She was there at that time so she knew. Now that she heard Elder Bai's words, while she felt happy for Kerr, she also awkwardly looked towards Elder Bai. Master, I'm sorry I'll let it go this time. If you misunderstand Master again, Master won't forgive you. Elder Bai glanced at Li Fei, her gaze mixed with a wisp of tender affection. No matter how she looked at this new disciple, she found him pleasing to the eye. She liked him very much. Thank you, Elder Bai. Under Duan Lingtian's signal, Kerr hurriedly thanked Elder Bai, and her beautiful face flushed red, causing her to be extremely cute. Little girl, the Peak Master of our Alcade Peak is the female disciple with the strongest strength in the 7-star sword sect. You'll be able to learn many things by cultivating with her, and you'll surely have a better future in the future. Elder Bai lightly smiled as she spoke to Kerr, like a kind senior. Actually, she really liked this delicate and cute little girl. But she felt that she didn't have the qualifications to be a good teacher, so she recommended the Peak Master of Alcade Peak to her, who was also the most mysterious vice-sect leader of the 7-star sword sect. The vice-sect leader that was usually elusive. Little sister Kerr, congratulations. Li Fei hurriedly congratulated Kerr, and a heartfelt smile bloomed on her face as she felt happy for Kerr. Duan Lingtian's face revealed a light smile as well. Although Kerr had a top sword cultivation method like the Frost God sword technique to cultivate, and there were numerous exceedingly formidable sword skills within the Frost God sword technique, however, these were mostly theoretical things. If Kerr was able to obtain the guidance of the Peak Master of Alcade Peak, then her strength would surely advance by leaps and bounds. The 7-star sword sect was a sword cultivation sect, and practically all the higher-ups of the sect used swords. It could be imagined that the attainments of the Peak Master of Alcade Peak in the sword would surely be extremely profound and unfathomable. Alright, now it's time to deal with your matter. The smile on Elder Bai's face instantly vanished, and her pair of fierce eyes stared at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian's brows raised. Li Fei and Kerr were stunned for a moment when they heard this. Although that Shi Yan was in the wrong first, but at the same time you defeated her, you ruthlessly crippled her Dantian. Isn't this going a bit too far? Elder Bai looked at Duan Lingtian, and her tone contained slight seriousness mixed within. Master. Elder Bai. Li Fei and Kerr were anxious. Elder Bai. Duan Lingtian looked at Elder Bai with a carefree expression, as if he utterly didn't take the matter before him to heart. You heard what Shi Yan said earlier, it was she who repeatedly said that she wanted to cripple my Dantian first. If my strength was inferior to her today, then the person whose Dantian was crippled would be me. What I did was only giving her a taste of her own medicine. Elder Bai, do you think I'm in the wrong? Even though it's like this, but she was a 7-star sword sect disciple after all, a disciple of my Alcade Peak. You have to give me an explanation for this matter, right? Elder Bai looked at Duan Lingtian as she slowly spoke. Elder Bai, I feel that there's nothing to explain. Duan Lingtian shrugged. He didn't feel that he was in the wrong, as if it wasn't for Shi Yan being overbearing, he wouldn't go so far as to cripple Shi Yan's dantian. His principle of doing things had always been that if others didn't offend him, then he wouldn't offend them. If others offend him, then he would surely retaliate with a thunderous strike. Elder Bai's beautiful brows frowned, and she was rather displeased. Master, the scoundrel did it for me and little sister Kerr today, so don't blame him. Li Fei walked over and held Elder Bai's arm, then shook it a few times as she spoke with a spoiled tone. Scoundrel? Elder Bai was stunned when she heard Li Fei. Little girl, he's your... Elder Bai, I'm the man of this disciple of yours. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth held a smile as he stared at Elder Bai. As the saying goes, a master is like a parent. If one really wanted to calculate, then Li Fei could be considered to be half a daughter of Elder Bai, and he could be considered to be half a son-in-law of Elder Bai. Elder Bai was stunned, and a bitter smile appeared on her face. Never had she imagined that the disciple she'd just taken would have such a relationship with this outer court disciple. Elder Bai looked at Duan Lingtian and sighed. Never mind, never mind. This matter was provoked by that Shi Yan in the end, so I'll consider it as verbally punishing you today. I hope you don't make it difficult for me in the future. Thank you, Elder Bai. Duan Lingtian smiled, then looked at Li Fei who was beside Elder Bai and winked at her for a while. Besides that, forget about that Shi Yan, her natural talent is mediocre. But her older brother, Shi Hao, isn't easy to deal with. He's already broken through to the 7th level of the Origin Core stage some time ago. Moreover, his combat experience is extremely abundant, and it isn't difficult for him to become an inner court disciple by relying on his 7th level Origin Core stage cultivation. Elder Bai reminded Duan Lingtian. This Shi Hao really dotes on his younger sister Shi Yan? You have to be careful of this person. Duan Lingtian nodded. Thank you for the reminder, Elder Bai. Okay. Elder Bai nodded, then looked at Li Fei and Kerr. I'm going to look for the Peak Master and tell him now, and I'll come look for you two girls tomorrow. Take care, Master. Take care, Elder Bai. Duan Lingtian's group of 3 sent Elder Bai off with their gazes. I truly never imagined that Shi Yan would be so shameless and even complain first. Fortunately, Master is wise and caused her scheme to be unable to escape. When Li Fei mentioned Shi Yan, there was still some residual anger on her face that hadn't vanished. She can be considered to have retribution for her crimes and was expelled from the 7-star sword sect. Duan Lingtian smiled lightly. We still have to properly congratulate little sister Kerr, as she's about to become the closed-door disciple of our All-Cade Peaks master. Li Fei looked at Kerr, and her beautiful eyes were dazzling like an array of stars. Big sister Fei, you're making fun of me again. A trace of rosy color appeared on Kerr's beautiful face when she heard this. Right, scoundrel, you said earlier that you made us drink some 10,000-year stalactite milk. What's that? Li Fei recalled the matter of being interrupted by Shi Yan earlier, and she looked at Duan Lingtian as she asked. Kerr looked at Duan Lingtian as well, and traces of curiosity flickered within her beautiful eyes. Duan Lingtian smiled. The 10,000-year stalactite milk is a type of precious treasure that can allow one to be reborn and link up the flesh, blood, meridians and bones within the body. It's able to increase one's natural talent in the martial Tao to the limit. Li Fei and Kerr were both shocked for a time when they heard the effects of the 10,000-year stalactite milk. They only returned to their senses after a long time. Scoundrel, what you mean is that the natural talent in the martial Tao of little sister Kerr and I have already reached the limit. Li Fei gasped as she asked Duan Lingtian. Exactly. Duan Lingtian nodded, then he looked at Kerr. Kerr, this is also the reason why I told Elder Bai earlier that you'll be able to break through to the 4th level of the Origin Core stage within a month. Compared to the past, your current natural talent in the martial Tao is like the difference between the heavens and the earth. You can't use your past gaze to look at it. Kerr lightly nodded, and a happy smile appeared on her beautiful face. Her man had never disappointed her. Her man that had always believed in her. There's also these 10,000-year stalactite milk. Duan Lingtian left behind 2 bottles of 10,000-year stalactite milk and passed the remaining to Kerr. Kerr, give these milk to little gold to consume after a certain period of time. You must not let it drink it all at once, otherwise, I'm worried it will be like little black and little white, sleeping like a dead pig. As he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian's tone had traces of helplessness mixed within. Scoundrel, little black and little white have fallen asleep again? Li Fei couldn't help but be stunned when she heard Duan Ling Tian, and she asked curiously. Duan Ling Tian nodded. Yes, they fell asleep after drinking the milk of the 10,000-year stalactite milk, and I don't know when they'll wake up. Li Fei and Ke were speechless when they heard this. Chapter 270. Squeak squeak, Duan Ling Tian had only just passed the 10,000-year stalactite milk to Ke when the little gold mouse stuck out its cute little head from Ke's sleeve and cried out. Its jade-green eyes were now staring fixedly at the pill bottle in Ke's hand that contained the 10,000-year stalactite milk, and it was filled with yearning. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse nodded to Ke as if it was begging Ke to give it the 10,000-year stalactite milk. Little Gold, the young master said that you can't eat too much at once. I'll give it to you after a period of time. Ke put away the 10,000-year stalactite milk, then rubbed the little gold mouse's little head and lightly smiled as she spoke. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse's eyes emitted a trace of grievance. Looks like Little Gold is the same as Little Black and Little White, they're all so gluttonous. Duan Ling Tian shook his head and smiled. After accompanying the two little girls for a while, Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled and said, Ke Little Fei, I ought to return as well. Under the reluctant gazes of the two young girls, Duan Ling Tian walked out of the gorge with large strides. This was Alcade Peak after all, the place where the seven-star sword sect outer court disciples gathered, and it wasn't appropriate for him to stay here for too long. Under the burning gazes of the Alcade Peak female disciples all along the way, Duan Ling Tian practically fled back to Migres Peak. Of course, there were many gazes that looked at him from the stone platform on Migres Peak. But the owners of these gazes were men after all, and Duan Ling Tian directly disregarded them. Duan Ling Tian. An aged voice suddenly sounded out, causing Duan Ling Tian to stop and look ahead. Nearby, an old man and a middle-aged man walked over side by side. The old man that greeted him now was precisely the Dubhe Peak outer court elder that brought him to Migres Peak yesterday, Lu Qiu. Elder Lu. Duan Ling Tian greeted the old man with a smile. He didn't expect to meet the old man as soon as he returned to Migres Peak. Lu Qiu slowly walked closer and looked at Duan Ling Tian's skin, which seemed to have completed some kind of miraculous transformation. You are? It's a long story. Duan Ling Tian shook his head and smiled but did not elaborate. Noticing that Duan Ling Tian wasn't willing to say anything, Lu Qiu didn't ask any further. He glanced at the middle-aged man beside him and lightly smiled as he introduced. This is Elder Zhao Lin, and he's also the outer court elder of our Migres Peak. Elder Zhao Lin. Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled at the middle-aged man as he greeted him. Yes. However, the middle-aged man merely glanced at him and raised his head. His face revealed an arrogant expression as he snorted through his nose. Duan Ling Tian frowned. Relying on his spiritual force and the experience of Samsara Emperor Wu, he was able to discern that this middle-aged man was at most in existence at the first level of the void-prying stage. A first-level void-prying stage martial artist's strength was far inferior to Lu Qiu, but the degree of his arrogance far surpassed Lu Qiu. Duan Ling Tian instantly had a bad feeling in his heart. However, he didn't mind. As far as he was concerned, he wouldn't have any relationship with this Zhao Lin. What happened to Zhao Lin was Zhao Lin's business and was unrelated to him. After Lu Qiu noticed Zhao Lin's attitude, he was slightly embarrassed and nodded to Duan Ling Tian. Then we'll be leaving first. Elder Lu, take care. Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled as he nodded. Lu Qiu was courteous to him, so he was naturally courteous as well. As for that Zhao Lin, he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. When he saw Lu Qiu and Lu Qiu leave, Duan Ling Tian left the Migres Peak stone platform and glanced at a nearby building that was bustling with noise and excitement. Many Migres Peak disciples were gathered there, or they used gold and silver to purchase medicinal pills and spirit weapons, or they used materials to exchange for medicinal pills and spirit weapons. In next to no time, Duan Ling Tian circled into the mountain path of Migres Peak, then sized up the surroundings for a moment. After confirming that no one had noticed him, he followed an inconspicuous path to head towards the peak of Migres Peak. Migres Peak was extremely large, the mountain path had 18 bends, and there were no less than 10 mountain paths that led to the peak of the peak. In next to no time, Duan Ling Tian arrived at the peak of the peak. There wasn't a single person on the peak of the peak, and he quickly arrived at the location of the crooked tree before leaping down. If someone were to see this scene here, the person would surely be greatly shocked, and would even think that Duan Ling Tian wanted to commit suicide. However, after Duan Ling Tian passed through the clouds and mist, he instead firmly descended onto the crooked tree. Whoosh! The crooked tree trembled for a moment, then stabilized in the end. Duan Lingtian's figure flashed, then directly flashed into the cave passageway that led to the stalactite cave. Once again returning to the stalactite cave, Duan Lingtian noticed that the two little fellows were lying there, and even their postures hadn't changed and they were still deeply asleep. They wouldn't really be the reincarnation of pigs, right? Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be suspicious in his heart, as the sleeping technique of these two little pythons caused him to completely lose his temper. After sizing up the two little fellows for a moment, Duan Lingtian slowly walked to the stone platform, then sat on it, consumed the origin strengthening pill, and started cultivating 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, WRM Python Transformation. The origin energy within Duan Lingtian's body roiled, and when combined with the medicinal strength of the origin strengthening pill and his almost perfect natural talent in the martial Tao, his cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds. At every moment, Duan Lingtian could feel the minute changes in the origin energy within his body. After an unknown amount of time, suddenly Duan Lingtian sensed that the origin energy within his body actually had a trace of a strange change. The extent of this change was extremely small, extremely light. But Duan Lingtian was still able to clearly sense it. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian opened his eyes, and his eyes were like an array of stars, and a trace of a dazzling sheen flashed within. I wonder if I can utilize this ability outside my body. In the next moment, Duan Lingtian's gaze focused, then he swung his arm, and his origin energy suffused and raged, whoosh. Above Duan Lingtian, 71 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form, and they were waiting for orders in the air, ready to dash out at any moment. Suddenly Duan Lingtian moved. Whoosh! His arm swept out, carrying the strength of 71 ancient mammoths as it traversed the sky. The air started to shake because of it. If one looked carefully now, one would be able to notice that the origin energy coiled around Duan Lingtian's arm was vibrating at a strange frequency. The vibration of the origin energy seemed to have formed a type of tremor energy. This is... Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted, and a memory of Samsara Emperor Wu flashed within his mind. This memory was related to Duan Lingtian's cultivation method, the third form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, the WRM Python form. The WRM Python form was a mental cultivation method developed by Samsara Emperor Wu from observing the habits of the demon beast, the WRM Python. The WRM Python was a type of demon beast that was between a python and a WRM. Its strength was extremely formidable, and its most miraculous ability was that it was able to emit a type of terrifying tremor energy from its body. Tremor energy. Duan Lingtian withdrew his arm, then his palm slowly descended, and his origin energy jumped and trembled on his hand. The frequency became faster and faster. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian's palm slowly pressed onto a protruding rock on the wall of the stalactite cave. In an instant, boom, 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 boom. As soon as the origin energy on Duan Lingtian's hand touched the rock, it transformed into countless rock powder that sprinkled down. He slightly exerted strength and pressed forward. In the blink of an eye, the entire rock turned into fine powder. What a terrifying tremor energy! Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted. Then he raised his hand and looked at the trembling origin energy on his palm with disbelief. The frequency of this origin energy's trembling was simply heaven-defying. Duan Lingtian believed that by relying on this tremor energy to exert his entire strength, even if he was only able to exert the strength of 71 ancient mammoths now, he might not necessarily fall into a disadvantaged position when facing a 6th-level origin core stage martial artist that possessed the strength of 80 ancient mammoths. Even to the extent that it was very possible for him to rely on this tremor energy to directly defeat his opponent. Although this tremor energy didn't provide any increase in strength, the method of exerting strength could be said to be heaven-defying. According to the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, the demon beast WRM Python relied on this tremor energy to exert strength. And even if it was facing most demon beasts that were a level higher than it would be able to easily kill them. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and was unable to suppress the excitement in his heart. So it turned out that this was the essence of the WRM Python form. Earlier he'd always thought that the WRM Python form didn't seem to be anything special, but now he knew that he'd still underestimated the Samsara Emperor Wu. Duan Lingtian recalled his cultivation all along the way. The first form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique was the Spirit Serpent form, and it stressed upon cultivating the fleshly body to the point of being as flexible as a spirit serpent. The second form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique was the Raging Python form, and it allowed Duan Lingtian to temper his fleshly body with origin energy and possess the ferocious strength of a python. A casual wave of his hand would be like a python swinging its tail. Now, the essence of the third form of the Nine Dragons War Sovereign technique, the WRM Python form, lay in the tremor energy. Tremor energy isn't a martial skill, but it's even more practical than martial skills. Because it can be used within any martial skill, and when combined with one's strength to execute it, it's able to exert an extremely terrifying and destructive strength. Duan Lingtian's eyes focused as he pressed his hand on the cavern wall, and his origin energy coiled around it. Chapter 271. Finally, Duan Lingtian eased up his feelings. Let's go try this quake energy. Duan Lingtian's gaze abruptly shone as he stood up. His gaze then descended onto the two little pythons, and when he noticed that they still didn't show any signs of waking up, he shook his head and left the stalactite cave by himself. As he stood on a crooked tree at the side of the cliff, Duan Lingtian relied on his acute spiritual force to sense the situation on the peak. After confirming that there was no one, he borrowed the strength of the crooked tree to leap up and descend onto the peak of Migres Peak. Duan Lingtian walked into the most remote path at the side of the peak and headed down the mountain. In next to no time he passed through the chain bridge and arrived at the main peak, Dubhe Peak. After descending from Dubhe Peak, Duan Lingtian's destination this time was the primeval forest behind the Seven-Star Sword sect. After all, he wanted to test the quake energy, and he couldn't just randomly grab a Seven-Star Sword sect disciple to test. So, he decided to go to the primeval forest and test the WRM Python transformation's quake energy on a fierce beast. Duan Lingtian dashed all the way down, and he quickly left the sect and headed towards the primeval forest. And at the same time that Duan Lingtian left, two Seven-Star Sword sect outer court disciples walked side by side on the chain bridge that led to the main peak, Dubhe Peak. Huexan, that kid seems to have vanished without a trace. One of the outer court disciples' face sank as he spoke to the other outer court disciple beside him. Migres Peak is so large, wanting to find him isn't an easy matter. Moreover, I've practically asked all the 19 new disciples that came to our Migres Peak with him, and all of them don't know his whereabouts. The latter was precisely Huexan, and he now had a gloomy expression as he spoke. I don't believe that he can hide for his entire lifetime. I'll surely make him pay 100-fold for the incident at the restaurant in Black Bamboo City. He actually dared ask someone to throw me out. The former's gaze went slightly cold and cold lights shot out in all directions. Don't worry, Yuan Wu will be able to drag him out sooner or later. Huaxian said slowly. The cold light in his eyes was no less than the former's. Soon after, when they were about to arrive at the main peak, Dubhe Peak, the two of them saw an old man and a middle-aged man walking towards them side by side. Elder Lu, Elder Zhao. Huaxian and Yuan Wu respectfully bowed to the old man and the middle-aged man. The old man nodded at the two of them. As for the middle-aged man, he didn't even look Huaxian and Yuan Wu in the eye from beginning to end. Perhaps in his eyes, Huaxian and Yuan Wu were not qualified for him to look at them in the eye. Huaxian and Yuan Wu were both a little embarrassed as they walked away. They had long heard of the arrogance of this elder Zhao Lin, so they were not surprised. The old man was precisely the Migres Peak's outer court elder, Lu Qiu. Presently, Lu Qiu and Zhao Lin were walking side by side on the chain bridge as they walked towards Migres Peak. Zhao Lin, when I saw that Huaxian earlier, I couldn't help but recall that Duan Lingtian. It's that young man we met at Migres Peak yesterday afternoon. Do you still remember him? Lu Qiu said to Zhao Lin. Zhao Lin nodded, and the corners of his mouth curled into a wisp of disdain. As far as he was concerned, Duan Lingtian was a pretty boy. Duan Lingtian's skin was simply whiter and more tender than a woman's. It's that Duan Lingtian. I wonder what happened to him. When he arrived at our Migres Peak the day before yesterday, his skin was still very normal, a healthy bronze color. But in a single day, his skin underwent a tremendous change, and was even able to compare to the skin of a baby, white with a tinge of red. It's truly unbelievable. As he finished speaking, Lu Qiu sighed with emotion and had a face full of shock. The gaze of Zhao Lin, who originally had a calm expression, abruptly lit up when he heard Lu Qiu, and his breathing suddenly became hurried. Elder Lu, are you sure his skin wasn't like that before? Zhao Lin looked at Lu Qiu and asked, slightly losing his composure. Although Lu Qiu didn't know why Zhao Lin would suddenly become interested in Duan Lingtian, he still nodded. I'm sure. The day before yesterday, it was I who brought Huaxian and 2 other outer court disciples to receive the 20 new disciples that had passed the outer court test. That Duan Lingtian was one of them, and was also a person personally chosen by Huaxian. I clearly remember that his skin was a bronze color at that time. What? Is there something wrong? Lucio asked Zhao Lin. He kept having the feeling that Zhao Lin's sudden reaction was perhaps because he'd noticed something. According to his knowledge, it was normally impossible for Zhao Lin to be interested in this sort of thing. But today he was out of the ordinary. It's nothing. Zhao Lin shook his head, but a trace of an imperceptible burning flowing light flashed past the depths of his gaze. I'm just curious, why would a person suddenly undergo such a great change? Lucio nodded, and didn't think too much about it as he continued walking side by side with Zhao Lin. Zhao Lin walked by Lucio's side, yet his mood was extremely agitated. Rebirth. He could be sure that Duan Lingtian had absolutely undergone the legendary rebirth. Coincidentally or not, he just happened to have seen records of rebirth in an ancient book. Supposedly, there was a miraculous liquid in Cloud Continent, and once consumed, it was able to allow a person to completely rebirth. The person's natural talent in the martial Dao would also undergo a tremendous change. Reaching the limit. Zhao Lin's heart was trembling. He clearly remembered that the miraculous liquid was the 10,000-year stalactite milk. Once consumed the 10,000-year stalactite milk, after being reborn, the person's skin would transform to become tender like a baby. He clearly remembered the records in that ancient book. 10,000-year stalactite milk. That gigolo consumed the 10,000-year stalactite milk. Zhao Lin's mood was extremely agitated and he was unable to calm down for a long time. But he didn't dare show it. After all, Lucio was by his side now. I must obtain the 10,000-year stalactite milk from that pretty boy, I must. Zhao Lin made a resolution in his heart. I hope that pretty boy can be sensible. Otherwise, even if I have to resort to unscrupulous means, I'll still obtain the 10,000-year stalactite milk in his possession. Traces of cold lights flashed within the depths of Zhao Lin's eyes. The 10,000-year stalactite milk was sufficient to change his entire life. No matter what, he must obtain it. Duan Lingtian naturally didn't know that the matter of him consuming the 10,000-year stalactite milk was already known by others. Presently he'd left the 7-star sword sect and entered the vast primeval forest. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian's figure flashed, and the scenery of the primeval forest swiftly flashed past him. The spirit serpent movement technique was vividly displayed by Duan Lingtian. Roar! An enormous roar sounded out ahead, causing Duan Lingtian to be unable to help but stop his footsteps. Before long, Duan Lingtian noticed that this was a spiky tiger, and its strength was comparable to a 9th-level core formation martial artist. Its pair of fangs that were like sharp thorns was its strongest martial skill. Whoosh! The spiky tiger noticed him as well, and it dashed towards him before pouncing towards him. Bring it on. Duan Lingtian's gaze shone as he directly moved to greet the spiky tiger. At the same time that the spiky tiger pounced over, 12 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared out of thin air. Now that Duan Lingtian attacked, only 12 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared above him. He didn't intend to use his full strength when facing a 9th-level core formation stage spiky tiger. Otherwise, his plan to test the quake energy would fail, and his trip here would be meaningless. He entered the primeval forest this time precisely for the sake of testing the might of the quake energy. Roar! The spiky tiger swiftly pounced towards Duan Lingtian. It opened its bloody mouth, and a fishy stench suffused the sky, causing Duan Lingtian to feel a wave of nausea. When he saw the spiky tiger before him, Duan Lingtian moved. Spirit serpent movement technique. Instantly, Duan Lingtian seemed to have transformed into an incomparably agile spirit serpent, and in the blink of an eye, he flashed behind the spiky tiger. Before the spiky tiger could react, Duan Lingtian had already made his move. Dragon's finishing touch. Duan Lingtian pointed out with his finger, and an ear-piercing howl sounded out. He directly skipped the step of drawing the dragon and directly added the finishing touch. Duan Lingtian's finger that was suffused with origin energy descended, directly penetrating the spiky tiger's thick skin and flesh before touching the spiky tiger's bones. Roar! The spiky tiger let out a sorrowful roar, and its voice was filled with rage and despair. Quake energy. The origin energy at the tip of Duan Lingtian's finger suddenly vibrated, and it vibrated at a terrifying frequency. Crackle crackle. Instantly, the spiky tiger's body violently trembled and its sorrowful roar stopped abruptly. Its enormous body crashed onto the ground, and waves of the sound of bones shattering resounded throughout the sky. What a terrifying quake energy. I still underestimated it earlier. Duan Lingtian withdrew his hand and stood there. As he gazed at the spiky tiger's limp body on the ground, a trace of coldness arose in his heart. Earlier he clearly sensed that when his finger touched the spiky tiger's bones and exerted the quake energy, the spiky tiger's bones started to tremble along with the quake energy, and in the end, they all shattered. The shattered bones pierced into various parts of the spiky tiger's body, including its internal organs, causing the spiky tiger to directly die. Duan Lingtian gasped, and traces of excitement appeared on his face. Whoosh! The excited Duan Lingtian didn't stop there, and he continued towards the primeval forest. This time he intended to exert a cultivation that was a level lower than the fierce beast, and see if he was able to successfully kill the fierce beast. Once he succeeded, then the quake energy would truly be too terrifying. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian encountered the next fierce beast. This fierce beast was a second-level origin core stage fierce beast. It was a wind leopard. This wind leopard was adept in speed, and in terms of speed, it was absolutely one of the best amongst second-level origin core stage fierce beasts. The wind leopard dashed towards Duan Lingtian with its bloody mouth wide open, and its fangs flickered with the sheen of saliva, desiring to swallow Duan Lingtian. Above the wind leopard, 30 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared. The seven-star sword sect's outer court disciple attire on Duan Lingtian's body flashed, and 20 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared above him. Chapter 272. Thank you, Nika, for your mighty and domineering gift, allowing me to become the first guardian of this book. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for your gifts and subscriptions. Your support will be my greatest motivation. Thank you. Duan Lingtian's gaze went cold when he saw the wind leopard pouncing over, and he was already prepared to meet it head-on and compete with it. Right at this moment. Duan Lingtian's spiritual force slightly moved, and he was able to sense people approaching, a total of 3 people. Duan Lingtian's figure flashed to temporarily avoid the wind leopard, and he looked towards the distance. Amongst these 3 people, 1 was a woman and 2 were men. Meanwhile, the wind leopard pounced towards him menacingly once again. Watch out! Right when he was about to make a move to kill the wind leopard, a delicate shout sounded out. Duan Lingtian only felt a wave of fragrant wind assault his nose, and he was able to see the graceful figure of the woman amongst the 3 people flash to arrive before him in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! This was a graceful woman, a 3-foot-long blade in her hand flashed out, and above her, 46 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form, 3rd level of the origin core stage. Grade 8 spirit weapon. Duan Lingtian saw through this woman with a single glance. Although the wind leopard's speed was swift, it was only in comparison to 2nd-level origin core stage martial artists and fierce beasts, and before this 3rd-level origin core stage woman, it didn't have the slightest strength to fight back. In the blink of an eye, it was killed by a single sword strike from the woman. Are you alright? After the woman killed the wind leopard with a single sword strike, she looked at Duan Lingtian with slight concern, and when she saw Duan Lingtian's skin that was like a baby's, her face revealed slight surprise. I'm fine. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he shook his head, then sized up the young woman before him. The young woman was around 23 or 24 years old, and although she wasn't as beautiful as Li Fei and Kerr, her dignified and delicate features and delicate and smooth skin revealed traces of vitality. It gave others a comfortable feeling. You're an outer court disciple of our 7-star sword sect as well, right? The young woman's gaze descended onto the outer court disciple attire on Duan Lingtian's body, and she lightly smiled as she spoke. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. He'd noticed earlier that not only was this woman an outer court disciple of the 7-star sword sect, the 2 men that came with her were also outer court disciples of the 7-star sword sect. Hello, I'm Shirlan, a disciple of Alcade Peak. The young woman smiled and greeted Duan Lingtian. Her face was kind and her bright eyes seemed to speak. Duan Lingtian, Migra's Peak disciple. Duan Lingtian also nodded at Shirlan. He had a good impression of this warm-hearted woman. Duan Ling, did you come to the forest alone? Shirlan looked around and found no one else, so she couldn't help but ask curiously. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. You're too impulsive. You should be an outer court disciple that just entered our 7-star sword sect the day before yesterday, right? You're only at the 1st level of the origin core stage. Even if you want to come to the forest, you should find a group. Otherwise, it's very likely that you'll lose your life just like before. Lan looked at Duan Lingtian and spoke with a serious expression. As far as she was concerned, if it wasn't for her making a move in time, Duan Lingtian would have already died under the claws of the wind leopard, and there would absolutely be no possibility of him surviving. Duan Lingtian was able to discern that Lan was really concerned about him, and he couldn't help but nod and smile. Thank you for the reminder. He knew that because he'd only exerted the strength of 20 ancient mammoths when facing the wind leopard earlier, it caused Lan to misunderstand that he was only a first-level origin core stage martial artist. He didn't give any further explanation towards this. He wasn't a person that liked to show off. Why don't you join us? You'll be safer if you follow us. At that time we'll split all the gains equally, how about it? My two companions are both extremely formidable. Lan looked at Duan Lingtian and invited him. Duan Lingtian originally wanted to refuse, but when he saw Lan's sincere and anticipatory gaze, he didn't refuse and nodded. Alright, then I'll be troubling you. As far as he was concerned, he had nothing to do anyway, so it wasn't a big deal to accompany these three people. Let's go, I'll introduce them to you. Lan lightly smiled to Duan Lingtian, then brought along Duan Lingtian to walk towards the two 7-star sword sect outer court male disciples in the distance. Uli Xiaofei. This is Duan Lingtian, a Migres Peak disciple. He's starting to join our group and enter the primeval forest to gain experience. I've already promised him that all the gains will be split equally between the four of us. Lan said to the two outer court male disciples. Hello, I'm Huli, Effective Peak disciple. Amongst the two outer court male disciples, the young man with a tall and robust figure that was similar in age to Lan lightly smiled as he greeted Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian smiled at the robust young man as well. He had always been one of those who respected him, and he would definitely respect them. Right at this moment, the corners of the thin young man's mouth curled into a cold smile, and his cold and indifferent gaze sized up Duan Lingtian from top to bottom. Then he frowned. Lan, he's only a pretty boy at the first level of the origin core stage, will only be a burden if we bring him along. Duan Lingtian's face sank. Lan and Huli were slightly embarrassed, and Huli said to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, he's Xiaofei, Effective Peak disciple. Although Xiaofei's age is similar to mine and Lan's, he's already a 4th-level origin core stage martial artist. His natural talent in the martial Dao is high, so it's unavoidable that he's slightly arrogant. Don't lower yourself to his level, just take it as you didn't hear what he said earlier. Since we're able to meet here and are similarly 7-star sword sect disciples, it can be considered to be fate. You can travel with us. Yeah, Duan Lingtian, don't take Xiaofei's words to heart. Lan smiled apologetically to Duan Lingtian. Xiaofei frowned and was just about to speak when he noticed that Huli and Lan both looked at him and shook their heads at him. He didn't speak in the end and only grunted in a low voice. Duan Lingtian was able to feel Lan and Huli's sincerity, and he had a rather good impression of the two of them, so he didn't refuse and nodded in agreement. Okay, we'll wander through this primeval forest together and continue walking deeper in. Huli laughed heartily, his heroic spirit reaching the clouds. What a man. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but praise in his heart as he looked at Huli. Duan Lingtian, the primeval forest is vast and boundless. We're only at the outer area now, and if we continue walking forward, we'll be close to the inner area. The fierce beasts there are much stronger than the fierce beasts here. Your strength is comparatively weaker, so follow us closely and don't get separated from us. The group of 4 walked in, and on the way Lan had a serious expression as she spoke to Duan Lingtian. Okay. Duan Lingtian smiled to Lan, and a trace of warmth arose within his heart. Although he wasn't afraid of the fierce beasts inside, Lan didn't know of his true strength, and only thought that he was a 1st-level origin core stage martial artist. You don't have strength, yet you still dare to wander through the primeval forest by yourself? You're courting death. Xiaofei followed behind and grunted in a low voice, and his tone didn't lack ridicule. Duan Lingtian frowned, then when he saw Huli and Lan smile apologetically at him, his brows eased up, and he didn't fuss about it with Xiaofei and acted as if he didn't hear it. He didn't want to make it difficult for Huli and Lan. This Xiaofei was their companion after all. The deeper they walked into the primeval forest, the more complicated the terrain was. The trees were dense, and the ground was covered in plants and thorns. The environment here was extremely suitable for concealment, and it was simply a heaven for fierce beasts. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force became vigilant, and he looked towards the nearby bushes, which was right beside Hu Li, and he shouted out in a low voice. Careful. Hu Li instantly became vigilant when he heard Duan Lingtian's voice. Right at this moment, an enormous wolf with glossy fur that was completely jade green pounced out from the bushes, and it opened its bloody mouth to bite towards Hu Li. In the sky, 40 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. A third-level origin core stage fierce beast. Green wolf. Sherlan exclaimed in surprise. Right at this moment, Hu Li moved, his upper body slightly leaned forward, and with a raise of his hand, the 3-foot-long blade on his back was instantly unsheathed. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. A sky-blue sword light flashed out as sword silhouettes suffused the air, transforming into a sword net that enveloped the green wolf, and it flickered with numerous dazzling sword lights, causing one to be dazzled. Above Hu Li, 46 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. Obviously, Hu Li was similar to Sherlan, his cultivation was at the 3rd level of the origin core stage, and his spirit weapon was a grade 8 spirit weapon as well. Awu! The green wolf emitted a shrill cry as it was torn apart by Hu Li's sword silhouettes, and its blood sprayed all over the ground as it crashed onto the ground. Hu Li slightly heaved a sigh of relief with a lingering fear in his heart, then he looked gratefully at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, thank you. If it wasn't for you, I would probably have been bitten by it. Yeah, Duan Lingtian, green wolves are extremely skilled in concealment, and we were utterly unable to notice it within these bushes. How did you notice it? Sherlan looked at Duan Lingtian with a surprised expression. She originally thought that Duan Lingtian's strength was weak and needed them to take care of him, but she never imagined that Duan Lingtian actually had such ability. Earlier, if it wasn't for Duan Lingtian noticing the green wolf in time, Hu Li would surely have been injured. From my point of view, I just happened to be able to see its pair of dark green eyes. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he found an excuse. He couldn't possibly say that his spiritual force was comparatively more acute, right? Shit luck. Xiao Fei's frowning brows eased up, and he glanced coldly and indifferently at Duan Lingtian as he grunted in disdain in a low voice. Sherlan and Hu Li frowned as they were slightly displeased with Xiao Fei. A 3rd-level origin core stage inner core is really small. Meanwhile, Hu Li found an inner core that flickered with a faint sheen on the green wolf's corpse. The origin core stage fierce beasts had already condensed into inner cores within their bodies. Inner cores were also a type of medicine refinement material. Hu Li, your Skynet sword technique was something you started cultivating when you arrived at the 7-star sword sect a year ago. I never imagined that it would have already stepped into the perfection stage. Sherlan glanced at Hu Li with envy. That green wolf, you killed it with a single strike of your sword. Many 7-star sword sect disciples didn't cultivate sword skills before they entered the 7-star sword sect. They only started cultivating sword skills after arriving at the 7-star sword sect. Duan Lingtian knew a little about this. Hu Li chuckled. The martial skill I originally cultivated had some similarities with the Skynet sword technique, so cultivating this Skynet sword technique is rather easy. Didn't your soaring wine sword step into the mastery stage as well? It's only at the mastery stage, and it would at least require another year to break through to the perfection stage. Chapter 273. Normally, when a disciple that entered the 7-star sword sect changed to cultivate a sword skill, they would give priority to choosing a sword skill that was similar to the martial skill they cultivated in the past. In this way, they would be able to cultivate their sword skill to the perfection stage in a short period of time. Besides a few people whose comprehension ability was terrible to the point it was difficult to look straight at, practically all the martial artists that were able to cultivate to the origin core stage had already cultivated their high-grade profound rank martial skill to the perfection stage. Their comprehension towards a certain martial skill was extremely deep. As a top sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, the sword skills within the 7-star sword sect were practically all high-grade profound rank sword skills. Unless the people that entered the sect originally cultivated sword skills, otherwise they would all change to cultivate sword skills. Sword skills relied on a spirit sword to execute, and to a certain extent, it possessed an advantage over most martial skills. Let's go. Xiao Fei frowned when he saw Sherlan and Hu Li start chatting, then he continued forward. Duan Lingtian, let's follow as well. Sherlan and Hu Li called out to Duan Lingtian, and the three of them followed together. In the following part of the journey, they would encounter some fierce beasts every once in a while. The strongest amongst these fierce beasts was only at the 3rd level of the origin core stage, and every time it appeared, it would be slain by Sherlan and Hu Li with a swing of their swords. Our gains aren't bad. We already have 7 inner cores of 3rd level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beasts and 15 inner cores of 2nd level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beasts. Hu Li, who was in charge of collecting the spoils of the battle, grinned. Be careful, the fierce beasts will be even stronger as we continue forward. Sherlan glanced ahead with slight fear, then looked at Duan Lingtian, mainly to remind Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian smiled to Sherlan to indicate that he understood. Roar. Right at this moment, accompanied by a muffled roar, a fierce beast with an enormous body yet extremely agile dashed over, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived before Duan Lingtian's group of 4. As the fierce beast dashed over, Duan Lingtian was able to feel the vibration that came from the ground with every step it took, as if the earth was quaking and mountains were swaying. As this enormous ferocious beast dashed over, 60 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form in the sky above it. Now, the beast was staring at Duan Lingtian and the others, as if it was observing something. 4th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beast, Elephant Rhino. Looking at the ferocious beast in front of him, Power of Who swallowed his saliva and exclaimed. The elephant rhinoceros was a terrifying fierce beast that was adept in strength and speed. It was able to knock an ordinary 4th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beast flying with a single charge, and it was extremely overbearing. Xiao Fei, it's up to you. After Sherlan saw the appearance of the elephant rhinoceros, her autumn eyes slightly narrowed and landed on Xiao Fei. Elephant Rhinoceros, a 4th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beast that possessed the strength of 60 ancient mammoths, in terms of speed. Shi and Li of Who were not as fast as the elephant rhinoceros. In terms of attack. Even if Shi and Hu Li were 3rd level Origin Core Stage martial artists and possessed grade 8 spirit weapons, the strength they exerted by relying on their spirit weapons was only comparable to the strength of 46 ancient mammoths. Compared to the elephant rhinoceros, the difference was too great. Even if she joined forces with Hu Li, it was impossible for them to be a match for the elephant rhinoceros. As for Duan Lingtian, in her eyes, he was only a 1st level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple that had just entered the 7-star sword sect, and was unable to be of help. So, as far as she was concerned, only Xiao Fei was able to deal with this elephant rhinoceros amongst the 4 of them. Xiao Fei's brows raised when he heard Sherlan, and the corners of his mouth curled into a complacent expression. Subsequently, his gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian, and he said with a mocking tone. If I'm not wrong, there seems to be one person amongst us that hasn't made a move yet, right? Since you've joined our group, since you want to share the gains. You can't wait to enjoy the fruits of others' labor, right? Xiao Fei's voice was extremely ear-piercing. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a cold smile when he heard what Xiao Fei said. This Xiao Fei said he was going to enjoy the fruits of others' labor? All along the way, the reason he didn't make a move was because Sherlan and Hu Li had fought before him every single time, and didn't give him the chance to make a move. If they really encountered danger, it was naturally impossible for him to stand idly by. But, in the eyes of this Xiao Fei, his cultivation was only at the 1st level of the Origin Core Stage. Under such circumstances, when facing a 4th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beast, the elephant rhinoceros, Xiao Fei pushed him out, and his vicious intentions were obvious. Xiao Fei wanted him to give his life away. What? You don't dare? Xiao Fei laughed when he saw Duan Lingtian not making a move. A pretty boy is a pretty boy. Besides relying on women, what other ability do you have? As he spoke up to hear, Xiao Fei intentionally glanced at Sherlan. Sherlan's expression was extremely unsightly. Xiao Fei, how can you be like this? Duan Lingtian is only a 1st level Origin Core Stage martial artist, and this elephant rhinoceros is a 4th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beast. Amongst the 4 of us, only you're able to deal with it. Asking Duan Lingtian to go up, isn't that asking him to give his life away? Xiao Fei glanced coldly and indifferently at Duan Lingtian, and laughed in ridicule. A pretty boy that enjoys the fruits of others' labor wants to share the gains with us without making a move? Is that possible? If he dies, then wouldn't it be better for the 3 of us to share the gains? You? Sherlan was angered by Xiao Fei to the point her face went ghastly pale, and she was unable to speak as her delicate figure lightly trembled. Xiao Fei, you're going too far. Hu Li couldn't bear to watch any longer, and he frowned as he said, since Duan Lingtian has joined us now, then he's our companion. How can you be like this? Hu Li. Xiao Fei sneered. If you and Sherlan want to protect him, then make a move yourselves. I'm not willing to share the gains with a fellow that enjoys the fruits of others' labor. Xiao Fei took a few steps back as he spoke. Subsequently, under the livid expressions of Hu Li and Shirlan, he added, "Right, if you expel him from our small group or if he sensibly leaves himself. Then I'll still help you." Xiao Fei's words were filled with complacency. It was as if he was sure that without him making a move, Duan Lingtian's group of 3 would be unable to deal with the elephant rhinoceros. Xiao Fei, you. Hu Li and Shirlan were angered by Xiao Fei to the point their faces went ghastly pale, and their eyes went crimson red. They'd noticed now that the elephant rhinoceros was already accumulating strength, and could attack them at any moment. If Xiao Fei didn't make a move, then the 3 of them would only have a path of death. But asking them to expel Duan Lingtian from the small group and submit to Xiao Fei's despotic power was something they were unwilling from the bottom of their hearts. "Duan Lingtian, you stay behind, Hu Li and I will deal with this elephant rhinoceros. If the situation isn't good, flee right away." Shirlan looked at Duan Lingtian with a serious expression. "Yeah, Duan Lingtian, you're only at the first level of the Origin Core stage and are far from being a match for this 4th level Origin Core stage fierce beast, the elephant rhinoceros. Just hide behind us and watch us make a move. If the situation is critical, then listen to Shirlan and flee quickly." Hu Li said to Duan Lingtian, and this robust young man's face had a serious expression as well. Duan Lingtian's gaze was complicated when he heard what Hu Li and Shirlan said, and traces of warmth arose within his heart. Umph. Xiao Fei, who stood behind, sneered when he saw this scene. Truly a touching scene. "Shirlan, Hu Li, I'll say this first. If this Duan Lingtian flees on his own and isn't expelled from our small group by you 2, then even if you 2 are killed by the elephant rhinoceros, I still won't make a move to save you 2. Xiao Fei's words caused Duan Lingtian's face to sink. This Xiao Fei was really going against him. Moreover, he even took Shirlan and Hu Li's lives as a joke. Flames of rage arose within Duan Lingtian's heart. "Xiao Fei." Hu Li looked at Xiao Fei, and a wisp of coldness appeared on the corners of his mouth, and his gaze became unprecedentedly unfamiliar. "Even if I die, I won't expel Duan Lingtian. He's my companion." "Me too." Shirlan's cheeks that were filled with spirit tightened, and her tone was incomparably firm. Good. Then let me see how you 2 deal with this elephant rhinoceros." When faced with Hu Li and Shirlan's attitude, Xiao Fei knew that his plan of forcing Duan Lingtian to leave had failed, and he was slightly enraged from embarrassment, and started laughing instead from extreme anger. Subsequently, he looked at Duan Lingtian, and a trace of a cold light flashed within his eyes. Duan Lingtian felt Xiao Fei's enmity towards him as well. He understood that this Xiao Fei was a petty person, and had always been unable to let go of the matter of him, a first-level Origin Core stage martial artist, joining the small group. Perhaps in Xiao Fei's eyes he would only be a burden. But he never imagined that because of this Xiao Fei would actually go insane and make Shirlan and Hu Li give their lives away. This Xiao Fei's vicious actions caused him to feel disgust from the bottom of his heart. "Shirlan, Hu Li, thank you for your good intentions." Duan Lingtian looked at Shirlan and Hu Li and lightly smiled. "Duan Lingtian, what do you mean by this? You're our companion, and no matter what, we won't allow you to leave our small group." "Yeah, Duan Lingtian, we're companions, we advance and retreat together, and share trials and tribulations together." Hu Li and Shirlan thought that Duan Lingtian intended to leave by himself, and their faces instantly went grim as they hurriedly spoke out. "At least you're sensible." How could this be possible? Xiao Fei stared blankly at the 40 ancient mammoth silhouettes above Duan Lingtian, and he had a face full of disbelief. How could this pretty boy possibly have such a formidable strength? Xiao Fei's face sank. As far as he was concerned, Duan Lingtian's natural talent had already far surpassed his. When he was at Duan Lingtian's age, he was far from having such a cultivation. In an instant, his chest was filled with jealousy. As he gazed at Duan Lingtian's figure that flashed straight for the elephant rhino, his face was gloomy, his eyes flickered with cold lights, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. So what if he's at the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage? Isn't he still going to die under the elephant rhino's fangs? As far as he was concerned, it was impossible for a 3rd level Origin Core stage martial artist to survive under the elephant rhino's fangs. Hu Li, Duan Lingtian is the same as us, he's also at the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage. If the 3 of us join forces, even if we're unable to kill this elephant rhino, we ought to be able to force it to retreat. After finding out about Duan Lingtian's true cultivation, Shilan looked at Hu Li and her eyes shone, and a trace of joy appeared on her beautiful face that was filled with spirit. Okay. Hu Li nodded and dashed out with Shilan. If 3 third-level Origin Core Stage martial artists joined forces, it was indeed possible to force the elephant rhino to retreat. But in next to no time Shilan and Hu Li's figures that flashed out stopped, because a figure flashed towards them and blocked their path, not allowing them to make a move to help Duan Lingtian. Xiao Fei, what's the meaning of this? Hu Li's face went ghastly pale. Now he'd already seen Duan Lingtian and the elephant rhino fighting, and was using a profound movement technique to tangle with the elephant rhino. As far as he was concerned, if he was slightly later, Duan Lingtian would very likely lose his life. Xiao Fei, what does it have to do with you that we're going to help Duan Lingtian? Don't go too far. Shilan didn't expect that Xiao Fei would block their path, and her beautiful face went pale. Her pair of beautiful eyes flickered with a sheen of rage as she stared fixedly at Xiao Fei. Shilan, Hu Li, I didn't intentionally block the two of you. I'm only helping that pretty boy. Didn't he tell the two of you that he doesn't need your help? Since it's like this, as a member of the small team, I naturally have to help him block the two of you so as to avoid the two of you stealing his limelight. Xiao Fei grinned, and his smile was extremely brilliant, with an expression of awe-inspiring righteousness. It was as if he was really helping Duan Lingtian out of the kindness of his heart. However, Xiao Fei's smile was so fake, in the eyes of Shilan and Hu Li. Xiao Fei, it's fine if you don't help Duan Lingtian, but you're even stopping us from helping him. Must you see him die before you're happy? Hu Li's eyes were crimson red, and he raised his hand to grasp the hilt of the sheathed sword on his back, ready to draw his sword at any moment. Xiao Fei, move aside. Shilan's voice had a trace of icy cold rage mixed within, and a 3-foot-long blade appeared out of thin air in her hand. What? The two of you still want to make a move against me? Do the two of you think you're a match for me? The corners of Xiao Fei's mouth curled into a cold smile, and a dark green spirit sword appeared out of thin air in his hand. Don't forget, not only does my cultivation far surpass the two of you, the spirit sword in my hand is a grade 7 spirit sword as well. Xiao Fei's face had a trace of disdain mixed within as he looked at Hu Li and Shilan. In his eyes, not to mention Hu Li and Shilan. Even if Hu Li, Shilan, and that pretty boy joined forces, it was impossible for them to be a match for him. If you still don't move aside, then we won't hold back anymore. Shilan's beautiful face had traces of rage mixed within, and she felt loathing towards Xiao Fei's current actions from the bottom of her heart. Why didn't she notice in the past that Xiao Fei was actually such a vicious person? Today she could be considered to have completely seen Xiao Fei's true colors. Xiao Fei, move aside. Hu Li had an excited expression as the 3-foot-long blade left its sheath and fell into his hand. What? The two of you really want to make a move against me? Then let me see if the two of you have made any progress recently. Xiao Fei started laughing, and his smile contained traces of disdain. Swish, swish. Shilan and Hu Li couldn't restrain themselves any longer, and they directly swung their swords and attacked, flashing straight towards Xiao Fei. Whereas Xiao Fei seemed as if he was playing with the two of them, and their swords were easily blocked by his sword, not to mention that the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand far surpassed the grade 8 spirit sword in Shilan and Hu Li's hands. In terms of strength, he was a 4th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist, and compared to the 3rd-level Origin Core Stage martial artist Shilan and Hu Li, he possessed an entire strength of 20 ancient mammoths. Under his sword, Shilan and Hu Li were no different than children. Whoosh. Presently, Duan Lingtian was executing the Spirit Serpent movement technique with his cultivation at the 3rd level of the Origin Core Stage, flashing around the elephant rhino. Every time he managed to dodge the elephant rhinoceros's charge without any mishap. The sharp fangs of the elephant rhino brushed past the 7-star sword sect outer court disciple attire on Duan Lingtian many times, yet it didn't even touch the corners of Duan Lingtian's clothes. Brr. The elephant rhino was finally enraged and went berserk. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian didn't dare execute the Spirit Serpent movement technique with his strength at the 3rd level of the Origin Core Stage to play with the elephant rhino. The current elephant rhino had already completely revealed the speed it should possess as a 4th-level Origin Core Stage fierce beast. The speed revealed by the strength of 60 ancient mammoths was far from something his speed revealed by the strength of 40 ancient mammoths could compare to. Instantly, the strength of 60 ancient mammoths appeared above Duan Lingtian as well. Now, he was similarly dodging the elephant rhino's attacks with ease. Suddenly, the sound of weapons colliding sounded out by his ears, and Duan Lingtian frowned. Could it be that Shirlan and Hu Li have encountered danger? When he flipped over and descended onto the back of the elephant rhino and looked over, he saw a scene that caused him to be incomparably furious. Xiao Fei. Duan Lingtian's face was gloomy, as he was able to discern that Xiao Fei was playing with Shirlan and Hu Li. Whereas Xiao Fei's objective was obviously to stop Shirlan and Hu Li from helping him. Although he didn't need Shirlan and Hu Li's help, Xiao Fei's current actions still completely infuriated him. I originally wanted to play with you for a while longer, but now, I don't have the time to play with you. Duan Lingtian gazed at the elephant rhino beneath his feet, and his eyes went cold. Instantly, 20 of the 60 ancient mammoth silhouettes above him vanished into thin air, and it once again sharply reduced to 40 ancient mammoth silhouettes. Duan Lingtian once again controlled his strength to the strength of 40 ancient mammoths. It was comparable to an ordinary third-level origin core stage martial artist. Whoosh! In Duan Lingtian's hand, a 3-foot-long blade appeared out of thin air. This 3-foot-long blade was precisely the one he refined when he bet his life on weapons refinement with the Chu family's second elder in the Swallow Mountain County's county city. It was capable of amplifying strength by 20%. Suddenly, whoosh! Duan Lingtian drew his sword. The strength of the Grade 8 Spirit Sword bloomed, and the 40 ancient mammoth silhouettes in the sky instantly became 48 ancient mammoth silhouettes. His sword flashed out as if transforming into a bolt of lightning that descended onto the head of the elephant rhino. The place where the sword descended encountered extremely great resistance. The skin of this elephant rhino is really thick. Chapter 275. Roar. Although the 3-foot-long blade had only pierced a little into the elephant rhino's head, the elephant rhino still felt pain. It let out a sorrowful roar, and its enormous body started to sway intensely, wanting to throw Duan Lingtian off. Duan Lingtian was as steady as Mount Tai, unmoved, and a wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian's gaze went cold. Quake energy. Origin energy coiled around the 3-foot-long blade in his hand, and it started to vibrate intensely, and the frequency became faster and faster. Boom, 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 boom. The terrifying quake energy vibrated within the origin energy on the 3-foot-long blade, and the solid skin of the elephant rhino was quickly torn apart, and the tip of the sword pierced straight into the skull of the elephant rhino. Fresh blood shot out violently. The quake energy was still continuing. The vibrating origin energy on the 3-foot-long blade in Duan Lingtian's hand directly shattered the skull of the elephant rhino. Roar! The elephant rhino emitted the last low roar of its life, and subsequently, its enormous body collapsed with a bang and dust suffused the air. Dead. Bang. The elephant rhino's enormous body collapsed, causing the earth to tremble, and it also caused the 3 people fighting in the distance to notice the commotion, and they all stopped. This. Shirlan and Hu Li stared blankly at the elephant rhino collapsing, and their faces were filled with shock and disbelief. They never imagined that Duan Lingtian had actually killed the elephant rhino. Moreover, Duan Lingtian was completely unharmed. No. Impossible. Impossible. Xiao Fei looked at the scene before him and was completely dumbstruck. That pretty boy actually killed the elephant rhino? How could this be possible? He was surely dreaming, surely. But when he pinched his thigh and felt the pain coming from his thigh, he realized that all this wasn't a dream but was real. Duan Lingtian took out the elephant rhino's inner core and returned to Shirlan and Hu Li's side, then he passed the inner core in his hand to Hu Li. Hu Li, keep it first, we'll divide it equally later. Duan Lingtian, you're really something. Hu Li gave Duan Lingtian a thumbs up, then he shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, I didn't see how you attacked earlier. You're actually able to kill a 4th-level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beast, the Elephant Rhino, with a cultivation at the 3rd level of the Origin Core Stage. It's simply unbelievable. Speaking up to here, Hu Li's eyes were filled with resentment as he swept a glance at Xiao Fei, who was not far away. Duan Lingtian, you're amazing. Shirlan also looked at Duan Lingtian with a look of worship. Duan Lingtian killing the Elephant Rhino had given her too much of a shock. Before today, if someone told her that a 3rd-level Origin Core Stage martial artist was able to kill a 4th-level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beast, she would absolutely not believe it. But now she had no choice but to believe, because it happened right in front of her eyes. Very quickly, Shirlan seemed to have thought of something. She looked at Xiao Fei with a face full of anger. Xiao Fei, from now on, you go your own way and we'll go ours. Lan's heart was filled with rage when she recalled what happened earlier. Fortunately, Duan Lingtian was fine, otherwise she would never be able to forgive herself for her entire lifetime. After all, it was she who pulled Duan Lingtian into their small group. Xiao Fei, leave. I, Hu Li, will take it as I've never known you in the future. Hu Li looked at Xiao Fei with a face full of displeasure. Now that he saw Xiao Fei, he couldn't help but recall what happened earlier, and he was extremely furious. What? Now that you two have this pretty boy, you intend to get rid of him after he's outlived his usefulness? Xiao Fei's face had already sunk when Lan spoke, and now his gaze went cold when he heard Hu Li's words. Do you two think that I, Xiao Fei, am someone that you can order around at will? He was already envious of Duan Lingtian, and now when he saw Lan and Hu Li actually wanted to drive him away for the sake of Duan Lingtian, a wave of evil flames instantly arose within his heart. Actually, asking him to leave this small group was nothing. But when he thought of how he left because of this pretty boy, his heart was filled with resentment, and he wasn't willing to let it go. Xiao Fei, what you did earlier really disappointed us. Hu Li looked at Xiao Fei and his face sank. I've said it before, I was only helping this pretty boy earlier. The facts prove that I was right to stop you two from making a move, as he himself is able to kill the elephant rhino. Xiao Fei sneered as if he'd long since known that Duan Lingtian had the strength to kill the elephant rhino. Actually, how could Lan and Hu Li not be aware of his little thoughts? For a moment, their expressions became unsightly. Shameless. Alright, there's no need for you two to harm each other because of me. Duan Lingtian shook his head and lightly smiled. When Lan and Hu Li heard Duan Lingtian's words, they were stunned for a moment. If it was someone else that helped Xiao Fei plead for leniency, they wouldn't find it strange, but the person that was pleading for leniency was Duan Lingtian? They looked at Duan Lingtian at the same time, and their faces were filled with astonishment. At least you're sensible. When Xiao Fei heard Duan Lingtian's words, he laughed complacently as he thought that Duan Lingtian was afraid of him. As far as he was concerned, even if Duan Lingtian was able to kill the elephant rhino, it was only because Duan Lingtian's luck was good. Moreover, Duan Lingtian spent a very long time before killing the elephant rhino. If he were to rely on a grade 7 spirit sword to make a move, he only needed a single move, and it would be sufficient to kill the elephant rhino in an instant. Duan Lingtian was nothing in his eyes. Although Lan and Hu Li didn't know why Duan Lingtian wanted to help Xiao Fei plead for leniency, but since Duan Lingtian, the person involved, didn't fuss about it, they didn't say anything further. However, they'd completely taken Xiao Fei to be a stranger now. Xiao Fei didn't mind as he stayed behind only for the sake of venting his anger and fighting for face. Moreover, he would absolutely not let that pretty boy have an easy time. Duan Lingtian naturally noticed Xiao Fei's icy cold gaze that swept over, but he didn't mind. A wisp of a sneer appeared on the corners of his mouth, as if everything was within his grasp. Let's continue walking. Duan Lingtian called out to Lan and Hu Li before continuing forward. Seeing Duan Lingtian's group of 3 walking forward, Xiao Fei naturally followed. His icy cold gaze didn't leave Duan Lingtian's side from beginning to end. Now, he wished for nothing more than to kill Duan Lingtian. However, he wanted to see Duan Lingtian being killed by the fierce beast. Only in this way would he be able to vent the hatred in his heart. The group of people continued to walk forward, and they'd only walked for a short while when Duan Lingtian stopped his footsteps. What's wrong? Lan and Xiao Fei both had puzzled expressions. Coward. Xiao Fei sneered and continued walking forward. I'm afraid we've encountered trouble. Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he spoke slowly. At the beginning, Lan and Hu Li were slightly curious, but in next to no time, their gazes shot into the distance, and their pupils couldn't help but constrict. A leopard with an ugly appearance and a body that was thin like a bag of bones walked over from the distance. This leopard had a pair of dark green eyes, and every step it took seemed to transform into a sledgehammer that smashed onto their chests, causing them to be slightly unable to catch their breath. Savage leopard. Xiao Fei's exclaim of surprise sounded out at almost the exact same time, and traces of fear and terror were mixed within. Savage leopard, a 6th-level origin core stage fierce beast. Even if he went against the savage leopard, he didn't have the slightest confidence. Once the savage leopard attacked, it was able to exert the strength of 80 ancient mammoths. Whereas even if he relied on a grade 7 spirit sword to attack, he would at most be able to exert the strength of 76 ancient mammoths. Amongst them, the strength of 60 ancient mammoths came from his cultivation at the 4th level of the origin core stage. The other strength of 16 ancient mammoths relied on the amplification of the grade 7 spirit sword. This was only offensive strength. In terms of offensive strength, he had a grade 7 spirit sword, but it was still inferior to the savage leopard. In terms of speed, a grade 7 spirit sword was unable to amplify speed, so his speed could only rely on the strength of 60 ancient mammoths to boost it. It was far inferior to the speed of the savage leopard that was boosted by the strength of 80 ancient mammoths. When he saw the savage leopard's pair of dark green eyes staring at him, Xiao Fei started to retreat. He was clear in his heart about the savage leopard's habits. Once the savage leopard targeted a person, it would chase after that person to the death, and even if that person fled, the savage leopard would still chase after that person and tear that person into pieces. So, it was practically impossible for him to flee. A crazy idea arose within his heart. If someone attacked the savage leopard, then the savage leopard would surely temporarily give up on that person and turn to target the person that attacked it. In next to no time, Xiao Fei retreated to the vicinity of Duan Lingtian's group of 3, and he shouted out explosively, "Shilan, Hu Li, and that pretty boy. Let's join forces and kill this savage leopard." Duan Lingtian's group of 3 didn't move when they heard Xiao Fei, and they looked at Xiao Fei as if they were looking at an idiot. "Xiao Fei, do you think we don't know the habits of the savage leopard? You want us to attack the savage leopard and attract its attention. Then you can seize the opportunity to escape." Facing the savage leopard, Shilan's heart was filled with fear, and her delicate body slightly trembled from fear. But now that she heard Xiao Fei's words, she couldn't help but open her mouth to ridicule him. "Xiao Fei, you're too vicious." Hu Li's expression was extremely unsightly. This Xiao Fei actually wanted to step on their corpses to escape. Did he really think he was an idiot? The savage leopard was very calm and didn't make any sound. It walked step by step towards Xiao Fei, as if Xiao Fei was the only one left in its world at this moment. Even if Xiao Fei retreated to the back of Duan Lingtian's group of 3, the savage leopard still followed him step by step. When the savage leopard walked past Duan Lingtian's group of 3, Shilan's face was deathly pale, and her delicate body trembled without stopping. Hu Li's expression was extremely unsightly as well. His legs felt as if they were filled with lead, and he didn't dare to move in the slightest. He knew that after the savage leopard pounced and killed Xiao Fei, it would shift its target to them. Facing the savage leopard, Shilan and Hu Li felt a wave of powerlessness in their hearts. Only Duan Lingtian had a calm expression. He glanced at Xiao Fei and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. Did this Xiao Fei really think that he was so generous and kind enough to let him stay? Actually, before Duan Lingtian killed the elephant rhino, he'd already planned to get even with Xiao Fei. After he killed the elephant rhino and his keen spiritual force detected the aura of the savage leopard, another plan arose in his heart. The current scene was all within his control. "If you don't join forces with me, then all of us will die." Xiao Fei's expression was unsightly, and traces of fear were emitted from his eyes. He didn't forget to make a final effort with the intention of persuading Duan Lingtian's group of 3. "Xiao Fei, if I'm not wrong, in our small group until now, it seems that only you haven't made a move, right?" Chapter 276. As a member of our small team, if you want to share the gains with us, you can't just sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor, right? Now, Duan Lingtian had completely returned everything Xiao Fei said to him earlier back to Xiao Fei. Xiao Fei was angered to the point his face went livid when he heard Duan Lingtian, but he was utterly unable to refute. These words were what he'd said to Duan Lingtian earlier. For a moment he only felt that he'd lifted a rock and dropped it on his own foot. At this moment he also realized a problem. Now, if he didn't take the initiative to attack the savage leopard, Duan Lingtian's group of 3 would absolutely not make a move. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the terror in his heart. "I'll make a move against this savage leopard now. If all of you don't join forces with me, then once it kills me, all 3 of you can just wait to die." Xiao Fei's eyes were crimson red as he stared at the savage leopard, and origin energy flashed on the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand. Instantly Xiao Fei moved. He seemed to have transformed into a gust of wind that charged towards the savage leopard in a menacing manner. Above him, 60 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. When facing the savage leopard, he completely exerted the strength of a 4th-level origin core stage martial artist and didn't dare hold back in the slightest. He knew clearly in his heart that at this moment, the slightest bit of holding back might instantly take his life. At the same time, the Grade 7 spirit sword in his hand flashed out, seeming to have transformed into a bolt of lightning that flashed gracefully before piercing towards one of the savage leopard's eyes. No matter what fierce beast it was, its eyes were its weakness. Now, beside the 60 ancient mammoth silhouettes in the sky above Xiao Fei, another 16 ancient mammoth silhouettes had appeared, the might of a Grade 7 spirit weapon. He used his full strength in this sword strike. This Xiao Fei is rather smart. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a sneer when he saw Xiao Fei attacking the savage leopard's eyes. But he didn't look favorably upon Xiao Fei. The savage leopard's speed was far from something Xiao Fei could compare to. It was impossible for Xiao Fei's sword strike to touch the savage leopard. The outcome was just as Duan Lingtian thought. The 6th level origin core stage fierce beast, the savage leopard's figure flashed and easily avoided Xiao Fei's sword strike. Roar! The savage leopard roared for the first time and it was full of anger. No! Xiao Fei's pupils constricted when he saw savage leopard getting out of the way and pouncing towards him. He let out a shrill cry. The next moment his body was sent flying by the savage leopard. Then the savage leopard opened its bloody mouth and bit at one of Xiao Fei's legs. With a baji sound, it tore off one of Xiao Fei's legs and blood spilled all over the ground. Ah! Xiao Fei's blood-curdling screams were incomparably mournful, causing people's hair to stand on end. What are you waiting for? Xiao Fei's complexion was deathly pale. With great difficulty, he used his elemental energy to stop the bleeding of his wounds. He shouted at Duan Lingtian and the other two. Shirlan and Power of whose expressions turned ugly. Asking them to take action? Wouldn't that be sending him to his death? However, when they thought of the fact that they were going to die no matter what and when they saw Xiao Fei's current miserable state, they glanced at Duan Lingtian who was at the side. Soon after, they looked at each other and fiercely nodded their heads, as if they had made some kind of decision. Duan Lingtian will stall for time for you. Hurry up and flee. Power of who suddenly shouted out explosively. His entire body seemed to have been injected with chicken blood as the 3-foot-long azure sword in his hand flashed out, Skynet sword technique. Sword images that filled the sky descended and enveloped the savage leopard. Duan Lingtian quickly flee. Shirlan also shouted at Duan Lingtian and followed Power of who as her sword flashed towards the savage leopard. At this moment, Shirlan and Power of whose gazes were unprecedentedly firm. As far as they were concerned, Duan Lingtian's natural talent in the martial Dao was so high and his future achievements were limitless. If he were to die here like this, then it would truly be a pity. Moreover, they really took Duan Lingtian as a companion and a friend. Duan Lingtian's heart trembled and a trace of warmth emerged within his heart. It had already been a long time since he was moved like this. The last time was over 3 years ago when Fatty Li Xian blocked Duan Lingxing's palm strike for him. Only then did he feel this kind of emotion. Two madmen. Seeing Shirlan and Power of who facing death unflinchingly, Xiao Fei endured the pain and his face was deathly pale and unsightly. Never had he imagined that even at this moment Shirlan and Power of who were actually still thinking of protecting Duan Lingtian. This caused endless jealousy and hatred to arise within his heart. Based on what? Based on what can he make Shirlan and Power of who act like this but I can't? Xiao Fei looked at Duan Lingtian with eyes filled with unwillingness and rage. There was also a trace of cold killing intent that was about to devour someone. The savage leopard originally intended to kill Xiao Fei, but now that it noticed Shirlan and Power of who flashing towards it, it instantly changed its target. A pair of dark green eyes stared fixedly at Shirlan and Power of who, containing traces of coldness. Seeing the savage leopard pouncing over, a trace of despair flashed within Shirlan and Power of whose eyes. But within this despair, there were traces of other emotions mixed within. There was determination and facing death unflinchingly. Everything was for the sake of fighting for a chance of survival for Duan Lingtian. Be careful. Duan Lingtian finally made a move. He knew that if he still didn't make a move, Shirlan and Power of who would die without a doubt. This wasn't what he wanted to see. Duan Lingtian's figure seemed to have transformed into an arrow that left the bow, and it was incomparably swift as it flashed directly towards the location of the savage leopard. At this moment he didn't hold back any longer and used his entire strength to dash out. Shirlan and Power of who were in imminent danger. He didn't dare dally. No. Impossible. Xiao Fei, who had one of his legs bitten off by the savage leopard, just happened to be facing Duan Lingtian. Now, when he saw the 71 ancient mammoth silhouettes that appeared above Duan Tian, he was completely dumbstruck. The strength of 71 ancient mammoths. According to his knowledge, even a 5th-level origin core stage martial artist seemed to only possess the strength of 70 ancient mammoths, right? This Duan Tian is a 5th-level origin core stage martial artist? How old is he? Instantly, traces of coldness arose within Xiao Fei's heart. He never imagined that Duan Lingtian's strength and natural talent would actually be so terrifying. So terrifying that it caused him to be shocked. Of course, after the shock in his heart was boundless jealousy and hatred. The heavens are unfair. Why does this pretty boy have such good natural talent? Whoosh. At the same time that Duan Lingtian dashed out, a sword appeared in his hand, a grade 7 spirit sword. He didn't dare be careless when facing the savage leopard. Shirlan in power of who only heard an awe-inspiring sound of the wind coming from behind them, then an incomparably swift figure descended before them. Duan Lingtian. Shirlan in power of whose faces went ghastly pale. Presently they didn't even have the time to think about why Duan Lingtian's speed was so swift, and there was only one thought in their hearts. Duan Lingtian actually didn't flee? Right when helplessness and bitterness arose within their hearts, and they thought that Duan Lingtian would die with them. They inadvertently saw the ancient mammoth silhouettes above Duan Lingtian. This glance almost caused them to be frightened out of their wits. They clearly saw that along with the 3-foot-long blade in Duan Lingtian's hand flashing out and his origin energy blossomed, 90 ancient mammoth silhouettes actually appeared in the sky above Duan Lingtian. It was precisely Duan Lingtian utilizing the amplification strength of the grade 7 spirit sword on top of his own strength of 71 ancient mammoths. Duan Lingtian's gaze went cold when facing the savage leopard that pounced over. Sword drawing arts. A straightforward sword strike was easily executed in Duan Lingtian's hand. In the eyes of Shirlan and power of Hu, the sword in Duan Lingtian's hand seemed to have instantly vanished without a trace. Of course, they knew that this wasn't true disappearance. Instead, the speed of the sword had attained a certain degree, causing it to be difficult for their eyes to catch sight of it. Their hearts were completely in suspense. They stared dumbstruck at the scene before them. Roar, at the same time that the savage leopard pounced over, it seemed to have noticed how terrifying Duan Lingtian's sword strike was, and its dark green eyes emitted a trace of terror as it let out a low roar and its body shook, wanting to dodge. But even though the savage leopard's speed was swift, but Duan Lingtian's sword was even swifter. The savage leopard's speed was at most driven by the strength of 80 ancient mammoths. Whereas Duan Lingtian's sword strike instead contained the amplification strength of the grade 7 spirit sword, and the speed of the sword was driven by the strength of an entire 90 ancient mammoths. Blood splattered everywhere. The grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand directly entered between the brows of the savage leopard. This wasn't the end. Duan Lingtian's eyes went cold, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. Quake energy. Instantly, origin energy raged on the grade 7 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand, and it vibrated at an extremely fast frequency, and the frequency became faster and faster. Boom, 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 boom. Under the urging of the origin energy, the terrifying quake energy entered into the skull of the crippled leopard as if it was crushing dry weeds. Crack, crack. The ear-piercing sound of bones shattering abruptly sounded out, and it caused one's hair to stand on end. Roar, the savage leopard emitted its final low roar, and its pair of dark green eyes that were incomparably dazzling a moment ago had completely dimmed down in the next moment. Its body that was only skin and bones crashed down, and it was completely devoid of any signs of life. The 6th-level origin core stage fierce beast, savage leopard, was dead. Silence. The scene was deathly silent. Shirlan and Huli stared blankly at this scene, and were unable to recover from their shock for a long time. At this moment, Duan Lingtian's figure was so tall in their eyes, tall like a mountain, and they could rely on him. Huli fiercely gulped down a mouthful of saliva, and until now, he still hadn't calmed down the shock in his heart. At that moment earlier, he only felt that his heart was almost scared to the point of stopping. Although Shirlan's reaction wasn't as exaggerated as Huli's, the gaze she looked at Duan Lingtian with was filled with a complicated expression. She recalled the scene when she just met Duan Lingtian not long ago, and at that time she'd even saved Duan Lingtian. Now it would seem that Duan Lingtian had completely suppressed his strength to play with that fierce beast at that time, whereas her actions of saving Duan Lingtian were only superfluous. When she thought up to here, her cheeks couldn't help but slightly burn. But Duan Lingtian's strength still deeply shocked Shilan and Hu Li. As far as they were concerned, the strength Duan Lingtian revealed earlier was at least at the 5th level of the Origin Core stage. A 5th level Origin Core stage martial artist around the age of 20. According to their knowledge, such a monster seemed to have never appeared in the 7-star sword sect. You're a 5th level Origin Core stage martial artist. A slightly hoarse voice entered into Duan Lingtian's ears, and it was filled with traces of icy cold hatred. Duan Lingtian glanced over. Chapter 277. Xiao Fei's voice was somewhat hysterical, close to a roar. His face was flushed red as if someone was tightly choking his neck. His pair of ghastly eyes stared at Duan Lingtian, flickering with frightening killing intent. Duan Lingtian obviously had the strength to kill the savage leopard, but he didn't make a move and allowed the savage leopard to tear off one of his legs. He was almost certain. This Duan Lingtian was absolutely intentional. Legs being torn off by the savage leopard and being chopped off by a human with a sharp weapon were two completely different concepts. The latter, as long as it was dealt with in time, there was still hope to reconnect. The former was impossible to reconnect. I'll be a cripple in the future. I'll be a cripple in the future. And all of this is because of him, all because of him. Xiao Fei's heart was filled with despair. His gaze was extremely cold as he stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. As far as he was concerned, if it wasn't for Duan Lingtian, he wouldn't be crippled. He pushed all of the fault onto Duan Lingtian. Now, if it wasn't for the fact that all of his origin energy was used to stop the gushing blood from his wound, he would have definitely made a move against Duan Lingtian to vent the hatred in his heart. Although he wasn't Duan Lingtian's match. But Duan Lingtian had destroyed him. He hated. It could be imagined that now that he had lost a leg, it was impossible for him to have a future. His life was destined to be a cripple, mediocre and useless. I did it on purpose? When Duan Lingtian heard Xiao Fei's words, he didn't deny it. He smiled coldly. Xiao Fei, even if I did it on purpose, so what? Why do you think I should save you? Xiao Fei's face sank. That's right, why should this Duan Lingtian save him? Xiao Fei. Duan Lingtian coldly stared at Xiao Fei. His face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. From the moment I joined this small group, you were unhappy with me in every possible way. You spoke rudely, but I didn't care. Only, later on, you actually wanted me to throw away my life. In order to make me make a move, you ridiculed me many times. It was nothing more than wanting to infuriate me and make me lose my reason. Is that so? Xiao Fei didn't deny it. His eyes were cold. But you didn't die. Yeah, I didn't die. Because I'm not the 1st level Origin Core stage martial artist in your eyes. A wisp of a cold smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth. I can imagine that if I was really only a 1st level Origin Core stage martial artist today, I would undoubtedly die when going against that elephant rhino. I'm very curious. Today is the first time we've met. Why do you hate me so much and even want me to die? I just want you to die. Xiao Fei's eyes had a piercingly cold light. You, a 1st level Origin Core stage trash? On what basis should you join our small group and share the gains with us? Since Shilan and Hu Li want to keep you, then let me see how they'll be able to protect you with their strength. As he spoke up to hear, Xiao Fei looked at Shilan and Hu Li, and coldness appeared on the corners of his mouth. And you too, I, Xiao Fei, a dignified 4th level Origin Core stage martial artist, entering this primeval forest with you too is your honor. You too actually disobeyed me many times for this pretty boy. How can I endure it? I just want this pretty boy to die, and only then will I be able to vent the hatred in my heart. Xiao Fei's face revealed slight insanity. Xiao Fei. Shilan and Hu Li's faces sank as they never imagined that Xiao Fei was actually so narrow-minded. Just because of this, he wanted to make Duan Lingtian throw away his life? Traces of coldness couldn't help but arise within their hearts. Fortunately, they saw Xiao Fei's true colors clearly today, otherwise even if they were sold by Xiao Fei in the future, they might still be helping Xiao Fei count the money. Duan Lingtian's gaze seemed to be enveloped in a layer of coldness as he stared fixedly at Xiao Fei. You conspired against me and wanted to make me throw away my life, that's fine. But you, what did you do when I was fighting the elephant rhino? I don't care if you don't help me. But Shilan and Hu Li wanted to help me, why did you obstruct them? On what basis did you obstruct them? Duan Lingtian's voice contained extreme rage mixed within. Xiao Fei's cold eyes swept Duan Lingtian, and his face revealed insanity. But unfortunately the elephant rhino was actually unable to kill you, pretty boy. I never imagined that you, pretty boy, concealed yourself so deeply. As he finished speaking, traces of unwillingness were mixed within Xiao Fei's tone. Duan Lingtian smiled, and his smile was very brilliant. So you're saying that you wish for nothing more than for me to die? Xiao Fei sneered. Yes, I wish for nothing more than for you to die. It's good that you admit it. Since it's like this, what does it have to do with me that you're being chased by the savage leopard? Why should I save you? Let me ask you, if there was a person who wished for nothing more than to kill you and was faced with a desperate situation, would you save him? Following Duan Lingtian's question with a smile. Xiao Fei's expression was as unsightly as it could be. Looks like you already have an answer in your heart. Duan Lingtian nodded, and the smile on his face also gradually vanished. The grade 7 spirit sword in his hand trembled and landed before Xiao Fei's eyes. You. What are you doing? When Xiao Fei saw Duan Lingtian's actions, traces of coldness arose within his heart, and his face contained traces of fear as he shouted. Duan Lingtian. Shilan and Hu Li were shocked by Duan Lingtian's actions as well. Although they were extremely displeased with Xiao Fei in their hearts, they'd never thought of killing Xiao Fei. What am I doing? The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into an evil smile when he heard Xiao Fei's naive words. Xiao Fei, are you really so naive? You've tried to harm me time and time again, and I've tolerated you time and time again. Now I can't endure it any longer. Could it be that I can't give you a taste of your own medicine? You want to kill me? Xiao Fei was muddled, and in the next moment, his eyes squinted and were suffused with a trace of icy coldness as he shouted in a low voice. You can't kill me. The 7-Star Sword sect has a rule that even if there's deep enmity between sect disciples, unless they ascend the life and death arena, they're not allowed to kill each other. Sect rule? Life and death arena? Duan Lingtian shook his head and laughed, then looked at Xiao Fei with ridicule. Xiao Fei, do you think that if I kill you in this primeval forest, then destroy the corpse and destroy the evidence? So long as Shilan and Hu Li don't speak of it, a fourth person would know that it was me who killed you? Knife. Xiao Fei's face was ghastly pale. Right, if he were to die in this primeval forest, how could the 7-Star Sword sect know that he was killed by Duan Lingtian? Shilan Hu Li. Xiao Fei looked at Shilan and Hu Li, as if he'd grabbed onto a life-saving straw. You two can't let him kill me. Don't forget, my brother knows that I came to the primeval forest with you too. If he doesn't see me return, he'll surely suspect you too. At that time, none of you will be able to escape. Shilan and Hu Li's faces went slightly pale, only now did they recall that Xiao Fei still had an older brother. Duan Lingtian looked at Shilan and Hu Li. A trace of fear appeared in Hu Li's eyes and he slowly said, Duan Lingtian, Xiao Fei indeed has an older brother, and he's a Fecta Peak disciple as well. He's a 6th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist. As he finished speaking, Hu Li's tone was filled with fear. As far as he was concerned. Although Duan Lingtian was able to kill Savage Leopard, and relying on the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand, he was even able to exert a formidable attack that was comparable to the strength of 90 ancient mammoths. However, Duan Lingtian's true cultivation was only at the 5th level of the Origin Core Stage after all. Whereas although Xiao Fei's older brother's strength was comparable to Savage Leopard, he was a human martial artist. In terms of speed, Xiao Fei's older brother wasn't inferior to Savage Leopard. In terms of attack, Xiao Fei's older brother was a 6th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist, and even if he didn't use a spirit weapon, he was still able to exert the strength of 80 ancient mammoths, comparable to Savage Leopard. If a spirit weapon was used, it was able to increase the strength of 20 ancient mammoths. In other words, Xiao Fei's older brother relied on a grade 7 spirit sword to exert an attack that was comparable to the strength of 100 ancient mammoths. It was far from something the current Duan Lingtian could compare to. 6th level of the Origin Core Stage? Duan Lingtian's brows raised. Even if a 6th level Origin Core Stage martial artist possessed a grade 7 spirit sword, when exerted at full strength, it would only be comparable to the strength of a little over 100 ancient mammoths. If he relied on a grade 7 spirit sword to exert the strength of 90 ancient mammoths, then utilized the WRM Python form's quake energy, he might not be unable to battle Xiao Fei's older brother. So, he wasn't afraid of Xiao Fei's older brother. Ah. Duan Lingtian glanced at Xiao Fei, then looked at Shilan and Hu Li. With his character, even if I let him off today, could it be that after he returns to the 7-Star Sword sect, He wouldn't ask his older brother to take revenge on us? Duan Tian wasn't afraid of Xiao Fei's older brother. But it didn't mean that Shirlan and Hu Li weren't afraid. Now, he only wanted to get rid of future troubles for Shirlan and Hu Li. After all, he really took Shirlan and Hu Li to be his friends in his heart, and he didn't wish for the two of them to suffer any harm because of what happened today. When he saw Shirlan and Hu Li slightly hesitating, Duan Tian added, "How about this? I'll kill Xiao Fei. After you two return, if his older brother really comes looking for you two, then say that you two separated from Xiao Fei in the primeval forest, and that Xiao Fei traveled with me later on, so ask his older brother to come look for me at Migra's Peak." Duan Tian thought that the reason Shirlan and Hu Li hesitated was because they were worried that once Xiao Fei died, Xiao Fei's older brother would look for trouble with them. So he removed any future worries for the two of them. Duan Tian, what are you talking about? We're a group and we'll face difficulties together. We'll absolutely not betray you. Hu Li was instantly slightly unhappy when he heard Duan Tian. Exactly, we'll absolutely not do that. Shirlan spoke out as well, and her beautiful face was slightly unhappy as well. Duan Tian's heart felt warm when he saw their current expressions, and he smiled apologetically. I spoke wrongly. But this Xiao Fei is ruthless and merciless, and it's hard to guarantee that he won't look for trouble with us after he returns. In my opinion, we should kill him with a single strike so as to avoid future troubles. I agree. Hu Li nodded, then glanced coldly at Xiao Fei without the slightest bit of sympathy. No, he won't. He won't. Chapter 278. At this very moment, Xiao Fei was completely terrified. Earlier, he dared to oppose Duan Tian because he never thought that Duan Tian would have the intention to kill him. Now that death was approaching, he felt fear from the bottom of his heart. He didn't want to die. Even if he was crippled, even if he had no achievements in the future, he still didn't want to die. If he died, he would have nothing left. I beg you. Duan Tian, I beg you. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Xiao Fei looked at Duan Tian, weeping bitterly and hysterically begging for mercy. The current Xiao Fei, when facing Duan Tian, no longer had the arrogant appearance from before. His face was incomparably pale, and he only hoped that Duan Tian would be merciful and let him go. The corners of Duan Tian's mouth curled into a cold smile. He never thought that this Xiao Fei was also a wretched wretch, strong on the outside but weak on the inside, causing him to look down on him from the bottom of his heart. If Xiao Fei could still maintain the arrogant appearance from before, perhaps he would still respect Xiao Fei a little. But now, he didn't even have the interest to kill Xiao Fei. Even so, he also knew that even if it wasn't for himself, for Shirlan and power of Hu, he still had to kill Xiao Fei. If this Xiao Fei was alive, he would be a scourge in the end. Seeing that Duan Tian was indifferent, Xiao Fei shifted his target to Shirlan and power of Hu. With a trembling voice, he begged for mercy. Shirlan, power of Hu, what happened just now was all my fault, all my fault. I beg you, I beg you. Ask Duan Tian to let me go, I beg you. I don't want to die, I really don't want to die. I beg you. Power of Hu's cold eyes swept past Xiao Fei and ignored him. Shirlan's gaze was complicated, and a trace of unwillingness faintly appeared on her face. Shirlan's expression was seen by Xiao Fei. A trace of hope rose from the depths of Xiao Fei's eyes. His body moved and he struggled to fall in front of Shirlan, causing his face to be covered in blood. Xiao Fei raised his head, and his face that was covered in blood revealed traces of remorse. He looked at Shirlan and said in panic, Shirlan, I beg you. Save me, I beg you. I really don't want to die, I really don't want to die. I beg you. As Xiao Fei begged for mercy, he fiercely slammed his forehead against the ground. Very quickly, a pool of blood appeared. Xiao Fei, do you think that using the trick of injuring yourself to gain sympathy will work? When Duan Tian saw this scene, he slightly frowned. He was deeply afraid that Shirlan had really been deceived by Xiao Fei. His face immediately sank as he shouted in a low voice. Shirlan, I beg you, I beg you. However, Xiao Fei acted as if he didn't hear Duan Tian's words at all. He kept kowtowing to Shirlan as his face revealed traces of sadness. Seeing that I've helped you and power of Hu a lot in the past, please help me. I really don't want to die. Xiao Fei, you're helping us? When you enter the primeval forest with us, when have you not been the one to pick first? When have you not been the one to pick the most valuable materials first? Hearing Xiao Fei's words, power of Hu's face sank. Why are you talking so much nonsense with him? Just kill him with one strike. Duan Lingtian's gaze was slightly cold as he stepped forward. The 3-feet-long blade in his hand flickered with a cold luster. Shilan. Xiao Fei's face went ghastly pale when he saw Duan Lingtian walking over, then he looked at Shilan and made a final effort to beg for mercy with a sorrowful expression. I really don't want to die. Save me, save me. I swear that as long as you don't kill me, I will absolutely not find trouble with you in the future. I will also not let my brother find trouble with you. Swear? Duan Lingtian sneered. For a person with such a vicious heart, when faced with the threat of death, could he believe an oath that he made? In any case, he didn't believe it. Duan Lingtian. An abrupt voice sounded. It was Shilan who spoke. Duan Lingtian frowned as he looked at Shilan. Shilan, you wouldn't really believe his nonsense, right? This person can't be left alive. Leaving him alive is also a disaster. Shilan took a deep breath as she looked at Xiao Fei's face that was dyed with blood. She sighed and said faintly, Duan Lingdan, what Xiao Fei did today is indeed difficult to forgive. But after all, the three of us are fine, but Xiao Fei has a broken leg. I believe that he has already been taught a lesson. Just let him go, okay? Duan Lingdan, I will definitely not find trouble with you, definitely. Hearing Shilan pleading for mercy for him, Xiao Fei's eyes lit up as he looked at Duan Lingtian and seized the opportunity. Let him go. Duan Lingtian looked at Xiao Fei and frowned. Shilan, as far as I'm concerned, letting him go isn't a big deal. But as far as all of you are concerned, he'll always be an unstable factor. This decision of yours is extremely likely to bring trouble to you and Hu Li. Duan Lingdan, I know that you are concerned about me and power of Hu. But Xiao Fei also made an oath earlier. Shilan said again. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a bitter smile. Shilan actually believed Xiao Fei's oath? Power of Hu, what do you think? Duan Lingtian looked at Power of Hu and asked. Power of Hu went silent as he was also moved by Shilan's words. Looking at Xiao Fei's leg that was torn off by the savage leopard, he sighed and shook his head at Duan Lingtian. In an instant, Duan Lingtian understood Power of Hu's meaning. Forget it. Since both of you have compassion, then I won't be the bad guy. Duan Lingtian sighed and put away the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand. His gaze slowly descended onto Xiao Fei's body. When Xiao Fei heard Duan Lingtian's words and saw Duan Lingtian put away the 3-foot-long blade, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. His entire body powerlessly collapsed onto the ground, and his eyes were filled with the joy of surviving a calamity. Xiao Fei. Duan Lingtian's voice was cold and indifferent like ice, causing Xiao Fei to tremble. He looked at Duan Lingtian with some lingering fear in his heart. Now he didn't dare to speak harsh words to Duan Lingtian. He already knew that although this Duan Lingtian was young, he was extremely decisive and ruthless in his actions. Earlier, if it wasn't for Shilan and Power of Hu not wanting him to die, he wouldn't have survived. I'm warning you. Don't have any crooked ideas after you return. Or else I'll definitely make you die without a burial ground. At the same time that Duan Lingtian spoke, a terrifying bloodthirsty killing intent rose from his body and enveloped Xiao Fei's body, pressuring Xiao Fei to the point that his face turned pale and his eyes revealed fear. No matter what, Xiao Fei would never have thought that this young man around the age of 20 would actually have such a terrifying killing intent. How many people had he actually killed? He didn't dare to imagine. Do you want to continue going deeper into the primeval forest or return? When Duan Lingtian looked at Shilan and Power of Hu, the killing intent on his face vanished without a trace and was replaced by a warm smile. Let's return. Shilan was slightly dispirited. The events that happened today caused her to feel exhausted. Power of Hu nodded in agreement. Then we'll return. Duan Lingtian nodded and walked side by side with Shilan and Power of Hu. They turned around and walked towards the outside of the primeval forest. As for Xiao Fei, after the figures of Duan Lingtian's group of 3 disappeared before his eyes, he relied on the grade 7 spirit sword in his hand to support his body and stand up. Using the grade 7 spirit sword to replace his broken leg, he limped towards the outside of the primeval forest. He knew clearly in his heart that with his current condition, continuing to stay here would absolutely be courting death. Duan Lingtian, Shilan, Power of Hu. I, Xiao Fei, will absolutely not let you have an easy time. All of you, just wait to suffer the wrath of my brother. Xiao Fei wiped off the bloodstains on his face, and traces of hatred and killing intent flashed past his eyes. The current Xiao Fei, compared to the him who begged for mercy earlier, seemed to have become a completely different person, outside the primeval forest. Duan Lingtian's group of 3 heaved a sigh of relief. After leaving the primeval forest, they didn't have to continue being vigilant if there were any fierce beasts lying dormant in the surroundings. Their strained nerves had all relaxed. Duan Lingtian, you're too formidable. Your current age ought to only be around 20, right? Shirlan looked at Duan Lingtian with a face full of admiration and adoration. I'll be 20 in another month. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he nodded. In a month's time he would be 20 years old. Duan Lingtian's words caused Shirlan and Power of Hu to instantly be petrified. Although they'd once suspected that Duan Lingtian might be below the age of 20, but when it really came to Duan Lingtian's own admission, their hearts couldn't help but tremble, as if a tempestuous wave had arisen on the calm surface of the sea, and they were unable to calm down for a long time. 5th level Origin Core Stage martial artist below the age of 20. Using monstrous wasn't enough to describe such natural talent. Freak. Power of Hu held back for a long time before sending out the 2 words Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian rubbed his nose in embarrassment. It seemed that no matter where he went, he would never be able to get away from the title of pervert. Duan Lingtian, how exactly did you cultivate? Shirlan was filled with shock towards Duan Lingtian being able to obtain such accomplishments at such an age, but she was even more curious about Duan Lingtian's cultivation experience. I don't know either. I casually cultivated to this extent. Duan Lingtian shrugged, then shook his head and smiled. Shirlan, the natural talent of martial artists isn't the same in Cloud Continent. Duan Lingtian's natural talent is absolutely top-notch. This is something we can't envy. Power of Hu shook his head as he knew his own limitations. Even though it's like this, isn't the gap too great? Shirlan blinked her beautiful eyes that were filled with intelligence. Then she looked at Duan Lingtian with an expression of envy, jealousy, and hatred. In next to no time, the group of 3 had returned to the foot of the 7-star sword sect's main peak, Dubhe Peak. Shirlan, Power of Hu. You 2 shouldn't have let Xiao Fei off today. I keep having the feeling that he won't let it go. Duan Lingtian recalled what happened earlier and felt slight regret in his heart. If he knew earlier he would have killed Xiao Fei with a single strike, then he wouldn't have to worry so much like he did now. Duan Lingtian, Xiao Fei does deserve death. But his appearance earlier was truly too pitiful. Moreover, we didn't suffer any harm. I feel that his crime doesn't deserve death. Shirlan faintly sighed, and her eyes emitted a trace of a sentimental brilliance. Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly. Are all women so sentimental? Duan Lingtian, I know you're worried about us. But I presume that Xiao Fei and his older brother wouldn't dare act rashly within the 7-star sword sect. Power of Hu lightly smiled to Duan Lingtian. I hope so. Duan Lingtian nodded. What's done can't be undone, and it was useless for him to continue thinking about it. Chapter 279. After ascending the main peak, Dubhe Peak, Duan Lingtian notified Shirlan and Hu Li, then walked towards the stone platform where the chain bridge that led to Migres Peak was located. Although it wasn't the first time Duan Lingtian was walking on the chain bridge, he still couldn't help but feel shocked in his heart. As he stood on the chain bridge and looked at the nearby mountains of the 7-star sword sect, he had the feeling of looking down on all the mountains. After walking past the chain bridge, Duan Lingtian stepped onto Migres Peak. As soon as he stepped onto the Migres Peak stone platform, Duan Lingtian noticed a fierce gaze that flashed over from afar and descended onto him. Duan Lingtian raised his head to look over. A figure slowly walked towards him. This was a middle-aged man, and between his brows was a sense of arrogance, and he had a superior appearance. It's him. Duan Lingtian frowned. He had some impression of this middle-aged man. Yesterday it was at this place that he'd seen this person. At that time this person was walking together with the Migres Peak Outer Court Elder, Lucio. This middle-aged man seemed to be the Migres Peak Outer Court Elder as well, and seemed to be called Zhao Lin. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian saw this Zhao Lin directly walk before him. He noticed that in the depths of Zhao Lin's gaze, traces of a burning flowing light were actually faintly mixed within, and within this burning flowing light traces of greed were revealed. Duan Lingtian's heart jerked. This Zhao Lin obviously had ulterior motives. Although he didn't know what Zhao Lin's objective was now, but he still subconsciously became vigilant. Duan Lingtian? Zhao Lin stood before Duan Lingtian, his arrogant gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian, and his tone contained a sense of superiority mixed within, as if a superior was speaking to an inferior. Needless to say, Zhao Lin's tone caused Duan Lingtian to be extremely displeased. "Elder Zhao Lin, do you need something from me?" Duan Lingtian calmly looked Zhao Lin in the eye as he asked indifferently. Seeing Duan Lingtian's current attitude, Zhao Lin frowned. An outer sect disciple actually used such a casual tone to speak to him? However, thinking of his purpose, Zhao Lin suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and said to Duan Lingtian, "Follow me." After he finished speaking, Zhao Lin turned around and walked towards a remote area at the side of Migres Peak. Zhao Lin's words sounded more like an order to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian calmly watched Zhao Lin walk out, but didn't follow him. Doubt arose in his heart. This Zhao Lin, when I saw him yesterday, he only glanced at me but also disdained me. Why is he suddenly so interested in me today? Don't tell me he's... Duan Lingtian felt a chill in his heart when he thought of his skin that was as smooth as jade and more delicate than a woman's. Could it be that this Zhao Lin had that kind of hobby? Thinking of this, Duan Lingtian naturally wouldn't follow them. Very quickly, Zhao Lin noticed that Duan Lingtian didn't follow him. When he turned around and saw Duan Lingtian still standing on the spot, his expression was incomparably gloomy. This outer sect disciple actually dared to disobey his orders? A burst of rage arose in Zhao Lin's heart. Within Migres Peak, there wasn't an outer sect disciple that dared disobey his orders. Taking a deep breath, Zhao Lin suppressed his rage, then slowly walked over and looked at Duan Lingtian. "I asked you to follow me earlier. Didn't you hear? Are you deaf?" Thinking that Duan Lingtian might have the thing he wanted, or perhaps know where the thing he wanted was, he gave Duan Lingtian sufficient patience. "Elder Zhao Lin, if you have anything to say, then say it here. I'll absolutely not go with you." Duan Lingtian frowned and didn't waste his breath as he spoke righteously to Zhao Lin. Zhao Lin's face slightly went grim as he shouted in a low voice. "Presumptuous." Following Zhao Lin's low shout, many Migres Peak outer court disciples surrounded over, and their curious gazes descended onto Duan Lingtian. Who's this pretty boy? He actually dared to enrage Elder Zhao Lin. Elder Zhao Lin is famous for his bad temper in our Migres Peak. This pretty boy actually dared to offend him, he's simply courting death. Looks like there's a good show to watch today. The group of Migres Peak disciples that surrounded over wished for the world to be in chaos. What are all of you surrounding over for? All of you move aside. Zhao Lin's face sank when he saw many people gathered in the surroundings, and a trace of worry flashed within his eyes as he shouted in a low voice. The worry that flashed within Zhao Lin's eyes was clearly seen by Duan Lingtian. Instantly his heart jerked. Could it be that I've really guessed correctly? This Migres Peak outer court elder Zhao Lin really has that sort of hobby? For a moment, Duan Lingtian only felt a chill run down his spine, and he secretly cursed in his heart. F***K. Looks like I really have to bask in the sun more. My body that's been reborn after consuming the 10,000-year stalactite milk actually drew the covetous eyes of this Zhao Lin. This Zhao Lin looks like a decent person, but I never imagined that he would have that sort of hobby. After confirming that Zhao Lin had ill intentions towards him, Duan Lingtian naturally wouldn't allow the surrounding Migres Peak outer court disciples to leave. Elder Zhao Lin, there's nothing shameful between the two of us. Why do you want them to leave? Duan Lingtian's words caused the group of Migres Peak disciples that were originally afraid of Zhao Lin's dignity and intended to leave to stop their footsteps. What does he mean by this? I don't know. The surrounding Migres Peak disciples looked at Duan Lingtian, then looked at Zhao Lin with bewildered expressions. What? Do I need you to teach me how to do things? Zhao Lin's face sank and he burst into rage when he heard Duan Lingtian daring to question his decision. Elder Zhao Lin, I naturally don't dare teach you how to do things. But I want to make something clear here today. Even though my skin is slightly fairer, I absolutely don't have that sort of hobby. So, Elder Zhao Lin, you better give up this thought, I won't go with you. As Duan Lingtian spoke, he rubbed his hands with a chill, then looked at Zhao Lin with a face full of disgust. As far as he was concerned, only by exposing Zhao Lin's true face would Zhao Lin give up his plans of coveting him. Whoosh. Duan Lingtian's words could be said to be like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, causing the surrounding crowd of Migres Peak disciples to be dumbstruck. The gazes the Migres Peak disciples shot at Zhao Lin with became extremely strange. So Elder Zhao Lin has that sort of hobby. I really didn't notice in the past. Looks like the reason he was enraged to this pretty boy earlier was because this pretty boy refused him. This pretty boy is really unfortunate. Only his skin is slightly fairer and more tender, but the other places are still filled with manliness. But it's precisely because of this that he actually incurred the coveting of Elder Zhao Lin. Don't speak of it, I feel disgusted just thinking about it. The crowd of Migres Peak disciples could be considered to have completely understood, now. The gazes they shot at Duan Lingtian were filled with pity. Looks like having skin that was too white wasn't a good thing. There was still a certain amount of danger when encountering a special group of people like Elder Zhao Lin. Brother, I pity you. A Migres Peak disciple that stood nearby Duan Lingtian looked at Duan Lingtian, then shook his head and sighed. Brother, why don't you follow Elder Zhao Lin? Elder Zhao Lin is an elder of our Migres Peak. If you follow him, then wouldn't you be able to do whatever you want on Migres Peak in the future? Another Migres Peak disciple winked at Duan Lingtian. I'll leave this opportunity to you. Duan Lingtian rolled his eyes at this Migres Peak disciple, as he didn't have that sort of hobby. Duan Lingtian's words and the commotion of the surrounding Migres Peak disciples had now entered into Zhao Lin's ears and eyes, and it allowed him to understand what had happened. This Duan Lingtian actually thought that he had that sort of hobby. Then he saw the strange gazes that the numerous Migres Peak disciples shot over, and for a moment, Zhao Lin was angered to the point his face went livid. He'd been in the 7-star sword sect for many years, when had he lost so much face? What nonsense are all of you talking about? Zhao Lin's face sank and his sonorous voice sounded out, mixed with frightening coldness. Instantly, everyone present shut their mouths. But the gazes they shot at Zhao Lin were still so strange, so disgusted, so disgusting. Now, they naturally thought that Zhao Lin had flown into a rage out of humiliation. Elder Zhao, Duan Lingtian looked at Zhao Lin and shook his head. Actually, I can understand that you have that sort of hobby. Really. Although I don't have this sort of hobby, but in my hometown, there are still many people like you. However, they wouldn't take this as a disgrace and most of us wouldn't look down on them because of this. The hometown Duan Lingtian spoke of now was naturally the Earth of his previous life. On Earth, gays and lesbians weren't a rare thing. Although Duan Lingtian didn't approve, he wouldn't look down on them. Every single person had the right to choose their own survival, and others had no right to interfere. What? Elder Zhao Lin, you don't believe me? Duan Lingtian noticed that Zhao Lin was still glaring angrily at him, wishing for nothing more than to pull out his tendons and skin him alive, and he hurriedly added, Elder Zhao Lin, what I said is all true. Actually, you don't have to be embarrassed. I can understand, I really can understand. I believe that these senior and junior brothers can understand as well, right? As Duan Lingtian spoke, he looked at the surrounding crowd of Migres Peak disciples. These Migres Peak disciples were originally slightly terrified in their hearts when they saw Zhao Lin become enraged, and now when they heard Duan Lingtian, all of them instantly seized the opportunity. Yeah, Elder Zhao Lin, you don't have to be embarrassed, we can understand. We can understand. Actually, it's nothing, you just like men and not women. Elder Zhao Lin, don't worry, we'll surely support you. The crowd of Migres Peak disciples comforted Zhao Lin one after another. Elder Zhao Lin. Duan Lingtian endured Zhao Lin's ghastly gaze and braced himself as he said, Look, listen. So many senior and junior brothers aren't too surprised after knowing that you have that sort of hobby. Everyone understands you and supports you. You? All of you. Chapter 280. Pooh. In the end, Zhao Lin's vital energy and blood roiled, and he was forcefully angered by Duan Lingtian and the group of Migres Peak disciples to the point he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood sprayed all over the ground, dazzling and resplendent. When they saw this scene, the group of Migres Peak disciples including Duan Lingtian were all shocked to the point of being dumbstruck. Elder Zhao Lin, we're not lying to you, we're really... A Migres Peak disciple looked at Zhao Lin like a rash youth, but he hadn't finished speaking when he noticed Zhao Lin's fierce gaze sweeping over, and he hurriedly shut his mouth obediently. Very good. I'll come look for you again. Zhao Lin took a deep breath, then glanced coldly and indifferently at Duan Lingtian before leaving. The crowd of Migres Peak disciples that were surrounding together opened up a path. After Zhao Lin left, the group of Migres Peak disciples looked at Duan Lingtian, and their eyes contained slight pity mixed within. Brother, looks like Elder Zhao Lin won't let you off so easily. Take care. Brother, you can only rely on yourself, we're powerless to help. Brother, don't be so white when you reincarnate in your next life. Even women would probably be envious of your skin. Perhaps it's precisely because of this that you'll be coveted by Elder Zhao Lin. One by one, the Migres Peak disciples spoke to Duan Lingtian. They shook their heads when they saw Duan Lingtian standing on the spot, dumbstruck and not reacting in the slightest, then turned around and left. Looks like he's already been scared silly by Elder Zhao Lin. I really don't know if he's unlucky or lucky. Our Migres Peak has so many disciples, yet Elder Zhao Lin just happened to fancy him. So, men must never be too white, or else they'll be coveted by people like Elder Zhao Lin. When these Migres Peak disciples left, they couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Finally, Duan Lingtian returned to his senses. The gaze Zhao Lin shot at him before leaving made him realize that this matter didn't seem to be so simple. Could it be that he doesn't have that sort of hobby? I've misunderstood him? Duan Lingtian could see that when Zhao Lin was so angry that he vomited blood, the cold gaze in his eyes was not a gaze of anger. Zhao Lin didn't seem like someone who had that kind of hobby. However, if he doesn't have that sort of hobby, why would he have that sort of greedy gaze when he looked at me? Duan Lingtian's heart was filled with confusion. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure it out. However, this time around, I have completely offended that Zhao Lin. Duan Lingtian shook his head as a bitter smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. However, he didn't care too much about it. That Zhao Lin was an outer court elder of Migres Peak after all, and with the sect rules of the 7-star sword sect placed there, he ought to not dare rashly punish him in public. Heaving a sigh of relief, Duan Lingtian strode out and prepared to return to the stalactite cave. When he thought of that Zhao Lin from before, Duan Lingtian always felt slightly uncomfortable in his heart. After observing the surroundings for a while, he gritted his teeth and went wherever he saw the most people. Before long, he followed the streams of people that were in groups of 3 to 5 and circled more than half of Migres Peak. He spent an entire half an hour. My spiritual force is insufficient to sense void-prying stage martial artists. Even if a void-prying stage martial artist was following me, I wouldn't notice in the slightest. However, even if it was a void-prying stage martial artist, it wouldn't be so easy to follow me. Duan Lingtian believed that after circling around for this half an hour, even if that Zhao Lin was really following him, he would surely have been shaken off by him. As the king of weapons kings on earth in his previous life, Duan Lingtian still had this bit of confidence. Before long, Duan Lingtian felt at ease as he found a small path and headed directly towards the peak of Migres Peak. If that Zhao Lin was really following him, then he would probably never have imagined that his residence and cultivation location was actually at the peak of Migres Peak. When Duan Lingtian arrived at the peak of Migres Peak, halfway up Migres Peak, Zhao Lin stood there with a gloomy and unsightly expression. That kid actually shook me off. Could it be that he noticed me? When he recalled how Duan Lingtian practically chose places with a lot of people all along the way, he was slightly doubtful in his heart. Now, Duan Lingtian running away right under his nose and shaking him off even deepened the doubt in his heart. That kid is at most an origin core stage martial artist. How could he possibly shake me off? Is surely his luck. Zhao Lin took a deep breath and made a decision in his heart. No matter what, he didn't believe that a young man around the age of 20 was able to shake him off. He was a void-prying stage martial artist. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian had returned to the stalactite cave within the cliff. Glancing at the 2 little pythons that were still snoring loudly, Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly as he shook his head. Subsequently, he sat on the stone platform and started cultivating. 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, WRM Python Form. As he cultivated, Duan Lingtian noticed something through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu. It turned out that the quake energy bestowed upon him by the 3rd form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, the WRM Python form, could be improved as well. When he was at the 4th level of the origin core stage, it only allowed the origin energy within his body to develop the quake energy. Later on, along with the improvement of his cultivation, the quake energy would improve as well. Now, I'm only at the 4th level of the origin core stage and the quake energy is already so terrifying. If I continue to improve, then wouldn't the quake energy be even more heaven-defying? Duan Lingtian opened his eyes, his gaze abruptly shone, and his face was filled with joy and anticipation. After entering the primeval forest today, he deeply experienced the might of the quake energy, and it could absolutely be said to be heaven-defying. Originally, with his cultivation at the 3rd level of the origin core stage and relying on a grade 8 spirit sword, he was still unable to break open the skin of the 4th level origin core stage elephant rhino. But when he utilized the quake energy, the grade 7 spirit sword directly pierced into the skull of the elephant rhino as easily as crushing dry weeds, and even shattered the skull of the elephant rhino, killing the elephant rhino. The quake energy was an extremely overbearing method of exerting strength. It transcended martial skills. And the 6th level Origin Core stage Savage Leopard was the same. He was directly killed by him like cutting tofu. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian started cultivating even more diligently. With my current natural talent, relying on an origin strengthening pill with a purity of 90% and above, I'll surely be able to smoothly break through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage within 3 months. Duan Lingtian was filled with confidence towards his current self. Since he consumed the 10,000-year stalactite milk, his natural talent couldn't be compared to the past. Cultivate. Duan Lingtian once again closed his eyes and started cultivating bitterly. He cultivated all the way until the 2nd day before waking up, and he was awoken by hunger. After casually roasting a suckling pig and eating it, Duan Lingtian burped, then left the stalactite cave and left the peak, intending to head to the Migres Peaks Trade Hall, which was the vast building behind the chain bridge. When he left the primeval forest yesterday, he, Shirlan, and Huli equally split the gains from the primeval forest. Originally, Shirlan and Huli wanted to give the crippled wolf and elephant rhino's inner cores to him, but he refused, as in that way, it wouldn't be considered an equal split. In the end, he only took the crippled wolf's inner core. Now, he was intending to head to the trade hall and use the crippled wolf's inner core to exchange for some materials. The materials he needed were precisely the materials required for the Blaze inscription. The Blaze inscription was an offensive inscription that was capable of annihilating a half-step void stage expert. The main material of the Blaze inscription was the silver flame grass, and he'd already obtained it from the Black Wind City's Ma Clan auction house on the way to the 7-star sword sect. Although he'd prepared some of the remaining materials, one of them was incomplete. If he wanted to inscribe the Blaze inscription, then that material must be sufficient. So he thought of the Migres Peaks Trade Hall. Within the trade hall, besides the Migres Peak disciples being able to use materials to exchange for medicinal pills and spirit weapons from the Migres Peak's alchemy elders and weapons crafting elders, Migres Peak disciples would frequently carry out some private transactions between themselves. The crippled leopard's inner core couldn't be considered to be precious, but it was still extremely difficult to obtain. As for the material that Duan Lingtian required, although it was rare, it wasn't of much use to alchemists and weapons craftsmen. So, Duan Lingtian only spent half an hour to successfully exchange for it. Using a material that he didn't need to exchange for the crippled leopard's inner core in Duan Lingtian's possession, the Migres Peak disciple's face bloomed with a smile. Duan Lingtian's face revealed a smile as well. He was finally able to inscribe the Blaze inscription. Right when Duan Lingtian was anxious to return home and intended to return to inscribe the Blaze inscription, he saw Zhao Lin once again. "You're really like a ghost that won't go away." Zhao Lin blocked his path, and his gaze descended onto him. "Elder Zhao Lin, is there something you need?" Duan Lingtian didn't evade and directly walked over as he asked with a frown. Now he could almost be sure that Zhao Lin ought to not have that sort of special hobby, but why did this Zhao Lin target him and not let him go? This was something that was difficult for him to understand. So now he urgently wanted to know the reason. Duan Lingtian. Zhao Lin looked at Duan Lingtian with a gloomy expression, and when he thought of what happened yesterday, his eyes couldn't help but emit a strand of dense killing intent. What happened yesterday had already spread throughout the entire Migres Peak. Now, no matter where he went to Migres Peak, he could sense numerous strange gazes looking at him. He believed that according to this trend, it wouldn't be long before the entire 7-star sword sect would think that he really had that sort of hobby. His reputation was practically destroyed. And the initiator of all this was the young man that stood before him now, an ordinary Migres Peak disciple. He'd already made a decision in his heart. Once his goal was achieved and he obtained what he wanted, he would surely think of a way to kill this Migres Peak disciple to vent the hatred in his heart. Duan Lingtian had lived 2 lifetimes, and in his previous life he was even a weapons specialist that walked out from a rain of bullets and mountains of corpses, so he was naturally able to sense the killing intent in Zhao Lin's eyes. Instantly his face sank. "Elder Zhao Lin, speak frankly if you have something to say." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.